Welcome back guys, we are back with another story on, what if Bella chose Felix instead of Edward? Before that, more than 50% of our viewers haven't subscribed our channel yet. So do it now to stay updated and to be part of our 1000 family, so let's get started on story. BPOV. I wanted to die. I watched in helpless horror as Edward turned and looked at me. Bella, I will always be grateful to you for saving me, but this is just not safe anymore. He said, watching for my reaction. I took a deep breath in. You're going to leave me here, alone. At the mercy of the Volturi when they come back to check if I've been turned. At the mercy of Victoria if she comes back. I asked levelly. He thought for a moment, then answered me. His words were like drops of ice-cold steel to my stomach. The Volturi will not come for a few months. By then you will be away at college, he explained. I shook my head minutely. The tracker, what's his name, Dimitri, he'd find me. Edward continued. Victoria wants an exchange mate for mate. She'll not harm you because you are not my mate. With that he ran, not even seeing me home safely. This irritated me to no end. And suddenly my perfect Edward seemed slightly less perfect. I sighed. I'd try to find my way home, and with any luck, I'd make it before dark. I began walking in the direction I thought we had come from. And cursed myself out loud for not having paid attention to anything but Edward. I'm so stupid. I turned in shock when I heard a soft, breathy reply. Yes, silly human, you are. I looked for a moment before I saw the red hair. Victoria, she stepped from being partially behind a tree as if in reply. Bella, are you ready to die? She sneered. Her red eyes looked frighteningly evil. I looked at her. I could understand her anger at the loss of James. Hell, I was angry at Edward right now too. Victoria, before you kill me, don't worry, I won't stop you, but let me say how sore why I am that you lost James the first. No, he was trying to kill me, and that's why he died, and if I were you, I'd be pretty mad at me too. I spoke, wondering to myself why no one had thought to offer Victoria some words of comfort. I mean, her mate died, and no one bothered to help her mourn. I looked at her, and there was a look of sheer confusion on her face. I took a deep breath and continued. I know what it's like to feel like your whole world has been ripped apart, and to have your heart feel like there's just this raw, gaping hole, and it hurts so bad, and I'm so sorry I was a factor in his death, but at least your mate loved you. Mine's just left me here to die. Needless to say, I was shocked when she dropped to her knees and started wailing. I cautiously moved closer to her, step by step. And in the most bizarre twist of events I have ever experienced in my entire life, I was holding a vampire comfortingly in my arms, a heartbroken vampire who'd made it her mission to kill me. Victoria, are you alright? Is there something I can do for you? I mean, I know I could die, and that's what you want, and that's okay, but can I do something for you first? Do you need anything? Victoria looked at me, extracted herself from my arms, and stood up. I held my breath and began trembling slightly. He left you here alone? She asked. I nodded, gulping, certain that death would be soon coming. She knelt down before me and put her finger under my chin, lifting my head until I met her gaze. I'm so sorry for everything, Victoria, it's all my fault. She shook her head. Bella, you apologized, fully prepared to die, and then you tried to comfort me. I may feed on human blood, but I'm not completely heartless. I am not going to kill you. I loved James, he loved me, and we never doubted it. What Edward has done to you is inexcusable. He left you all alone, fully aware of the danger. I am angry for you. She offered me her hand and helped me get up. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot, little swan. She said. Okay, I thought to myself. This is definitely weird, but at least I'm not going to die, at least not at the hands of Victoria the Volturi, however. Victoria. She glanced at me and I continued. You weren't my only problem. The Volturi let Alice and Edward and I out of Volterra on the condition that I be turned in soon. I can't believe I'm about to ask my former enemy for her help, and that's obviously not going to happen. I trailed off. Victoria sat down on a rock and thought. What if we took you to Volterra, and explained that the Cullens left you again? But you wanted to come to Italy to honor the requirement placed upon you by the Volturi, even if none of the Cullens had any intention of honoring it. That might work. Her voice trailed off. I nodded. It probably was the best policy. I need to sit down or eat, or I don't know, this is all a bit much to take. Everything I thought I knew has sort of flip-flopped. Edward's gone. You aren't trying to kill me, in fact. You just came up with probably the best idea ever on how to solve my problem. I need to process all of this, I said quietly, knowing full well Victoria could hear me. BPOV. Victoria came back with me to my house and jumped through my bedroom window, while I walked in the front door. I made Charlie dinner, chicken and gravy with waffles, don't knock it till you try it. And sat down. I would have thought you'd be out with Edward. He said, more of an inquiry, really. No, Edward and I aren't back together, I was just doing his family a favor by talking some sense into him. I replied. He looked relieved. And to tell the truth, I was relieved too. I guess being left alone in a forest by someone who was supposed to love you just didn't make any sense to me. After dinner, I washed the dishes and climbed the stairs. I nodded to Victoria, who was sitting on my hope chest, her legs crossed. I sat down on my bed and we watched each other, neither of us wanting to say anything until Charlie was asleep. I could hear him turn on the TV in his bedroom and then Victoria and I dared to speak. Victoria, what about Charlie? I owe him some closure. I can't just disappear, it would kill him. I whispered. She looked at me for a moment and then nodded. Forgot how strong some family ties can be, she stated. She rested her chin in her hands, her elbow on her knee. We both NDERED until I was startled out of my reverie by the sound of Victoria snapping her fingers in an epiphany. I've got it. You could always talk to Charlie about wanting some time off before college, Anting to see the world for a year, then when it's time to come back you could always say you want to go to school in Italy, that'll buy you another 4 years, and if you have an easy enough time of being a newborn, you could always come back for a surprise visit, she said, her red eyes shining. I nodded in agreement. It was probably the best way to go about things. Victoria didn't just have a knack for evasion. She had a knack for finding the best solutions to everything so far. 2 weeks later, I looked up at the massive, ornately carved wooden door leading into the castle of Volterra. I looked over at Victoria. Vic, can I ask you something? She looked at me quizzically. Why are you helping me? I asked. She thought for a moment before speaking. Like I said, little swan, I may drink human blood but I'm not heartless. Edward and his little family didn't think twice about leaving you unprotected. I'm not like that, she said before knocking on the massive doors. Charlie had accepted my explanation without question. He'd told me he understood, he'd had a little bit of the wanderlust himself when he was my age. I shook my head in amazement. Everything was going so smoothly, I couldn't believe it. I brought my attention back to the present and watched as the doors slowly swung open. It almost had a theatrical quality to it, making me chuckle to myself. Victoria raised an eyebrow at me. It's nothing, it just struck me how this would make a perfect movie scene with the doors opening like that. I explained. She allowed a small, fleeting smile. Are you just going to stand there and stare, or are you going to Bella? What are you doing here? I looked up into the blood-red eyes of Felix. We're here to see Bella has a promise to keep, came Victoria's crystalline voice. Felix looked over to her and nodded. Then beckoned us inside. He led us down a long corridor and I couldn't help but look up, awestruck, at the beautifully sculpted marble columns, flowing fleur-de-lis and Greco-Roman embellishments. I hadn't realized I had stopped until Felix's face popped directly in front of mine. Like what you see, Miss Swan? He asked derisively. I bit my lip and then replied, well, I did. But then your face got in the way. If a vampire's face could have gotten red in anger, I imagine Felix's face would have rivaled his eyes in redness. He growled but was cut off by a cheery, feathery voice floating down the hall. Felix, that will do, thank you. Eros said as he walked towards us. Bella, my dear, to what do I owe the honor? And, here he paused, glancing at Victoria. I'm sorry, who are you, my dear? Victoria curtsied and I almost giggled at how unnatural it seemed to her. But I doubt I would have done better. I'm Victoria, sir, a nomad. Eros nodded before turning back to me. Bella, why are you here? And still human? He asked again. I took a deep breath in and bit my lip, then spoke. I came to honor the condition of the release of Alice and Edward Cullen, and myself, from Volterra. I said. Eros clapped his hands together and kept them together, his fingertips just barely touching his chin. Well, this is wonderful news, but why are you not here with the Cullens? I would have thought they would have been the ones to turn you. Here I flinched, slightly, but Arrow caught it and frowned. Never mind, Miss Swan, this story can wait for my brothers. You will come to our throne room first thing in the morning to tell us the tale. It will do no good to repeat it more than necessary, it seems. Felix, please show Miss Swan and her companion to a guest room. Arrow, sir, Victoria started. He looked at her, and she continued. I need to feed. Arrow nodded and called for Jane, who suddenly appeared from an adjoining room. Take Victoria and get her some sustenance. Then escort her to a guest room. Jane nodded and beckoned for Victoria to follow her. Arrow looked at me almost kindly and said, Bella, Felix will show you to your room. He nodded to Felix, then bid me good night. Felix started walking, then as an afterthought, called over his shoulder. Come on. I jogged to catch up with him, and once I had, for some reason I decided to tease him. Ah, Felix, is that any way to treat the meal you call dibs on? I admonished playfully. He growled, and before I could blink, he had me up against the wall, his face contorted in anger. Listen, girl, you do not want to make me angry. You smell absolutely. Here he paused and drug his nose along my neck, inhaling deeply. I shivered in fear, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Delectable. And I would forever hate myself if I brought down the wrath of Arrow when he has such aspirations for you. He dropped me, but didn't back away, and I muttered softly, geez, I know. Boys pretend to hate you when they really like you, but holy crow, Felix, that's a little overboard there. I was not going to make anything easy on him. I could have sworn I heard a chuckle before he hissed under his breath. You are so infuriating, girl. I followed Felix as he continued down the hall, though he moved at a more human pace, so I was easily able to keep up. So, Felix, maybe I'd try to be nice. Ew. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. I noticed he stopped to look at me, his face a mask of irritation. What now? He said, exasperated. I huffed. Sheesh, never mind if you're going to be such a sourpuss. Forget being nice. He looked confused and continued down the hall. We stopped before another beautifully carved wooden door. I ran my fingers over the carvings and breathed in softly. Everything here is so beautiful, I said softly. Felix snorted. It gets pretty mundane after several centuries. He said coldly. I turned to look at him. Yeah, you'd probably be Pr. Eddie mundane looking after a few hundred years, not that you aren't much to look at now. I sneered. Screw him. Looks like I'd made my first enemy before I was even turned. This was going to be a really, really long eternity. I was pulled out of my reverie by being slammed, well, not really slammed against the wall again. Felix was gripping my shoulders really hard. I flinched. I told you, do not make me angry. He growled. I whimpered softly. Felix, you're hurting me. He held me there, unheeding my words. I bit my lip to prevent the tears from flowing. He stared at me, unblinking. Why aren't you screaming then? He asked in an angry voice so low I could barely hear him. When I found my voice, it shook with the tears that threatened to leave my eyes and slip down my face. I don't want to get you in trouble, I whimpered. Disbelief flashed across his face and he dropped me. I fell to the floor and felt a sharp pain in my ankle, and subsequently bit back a yelp. How high had he been holding me? I stayed on the floor and drew my knees to my chest. He paced a moment or two and then knelt down in front of me. Are you all right, girl? He asked. The wicked edge had gone from his voice a little. I went to stand up. And bit my lip hard when I tried to put weight on my ankle. Yeah, that's probably severely sprained. I drew my foot up slightly and leaned on the door to push it open. I hopped into the room and over to a chaise lounge near the window. I flopped down on it and watched as Felix tossed my suitcase on the bed and looked at me. I warned you not to get me angry, he said. I turned my face away from him and looked out the window at the night sky. He stood there for a few moments, before turning and exiting the room, slamming the door behind him. I was all ready to attempt to get up and unpack my things when a knock came at my door. Ah, Felix was probably back to torment me. Come in, I replied to the knock. The door swung open, and imagine my shock when it was Jane. She walked in casually, as if she belonged there, in my room, well, a guest room. She flopped down on a couch and studied me silently, her face emotionless. I'm sorry Jane, can I help you? I stammered. She shook her head. No, I thought maybe I'd come in and scope you out. Where's the control freak? She inquired. Control freak? I asked. She smiled. The Ice Princess can smile for real. Holy crow. Cullen. I nodded. He won't be joining me here, Jane. He doesn't even know I'm here. But unlike some people, I stick to my word. She allowed a flicker of shock and then smiled again. It's a good quality to have. She replied, getting up and moving to leave. Then my stomach made known that it was hungry. She looked at me in horror, then laughed. She can laugh too. I'll have Felix bring you something to eat. I groaned silently to myself. As she turned to go, I called out to her. Jane. She turned and looked at me. Can you tell him to hold the arsenic, and if he absolutely can't, tell him I like my poison on the side. All I heard was a peal of laughter as she ran out of my room. I hobbled over to my suitcase and took out my black lounge pants and a comfy hoodie. I pulled my t-shirt over my head, my shoulders crying out against the movement. I bit my lip so I wouldn't cry out in pain. Then I looked in the mirror and saw 2 bruises slowly starting to form. I stared at them for a moment. And then I realized the door had opened, and Felix was standing in the doorway, an odd expression on his face. Maybe aghast. No, maybe irritation that I wasn't fully dressed. I pulled my hoodie on and whirled around. Felix, didn't your mama ever teach you how to knock? He shrugged and brought in a tray of food. I wasn't going to let this go. Felix, I hissed, I could have been completely naked. He looked at me again and a scowl crossed his face. You think I really care if I see you, or any woman naked? He growled lowly. Trust me, honey, you've seen one, you've seen them all. I don't give a shit how special you think you are not. Do you understand me? Imagine that little big, dude is huge. Jerkhead's shock when my shoulders slumped and I whispered hoarsely. I know, Felix. I know I'm nothing, okay. I know I'm worthless, I know I'm ugly, I know I'm ordinary, and that is why the Cullens left me to die. They didn't care that they were leaving me out in the open for Victoria. They didn't care that you and your coven were going to come and check if I was human, and kill me if I was. They didn't care, and that's why they left me to die. Because I wasn't worthy to be a fricking Cullen. I fairly spat the word Cullen through my teeth. I wasn't worthy enough to deserve little Edward's love, and I am so sick and tired of pretending I don't fricking care. Because all this fuckery has served to do is make me very painfully aware of exactly how worthless I am, and I don't need you to remind me of that. So just leave the food and get out. I pointed to the door. Felix glanced around, and then turned on his heel and left. I collapsed and started sobbing silently. FPOV. I had to tell Arrow. I just had to. His shot at putting those ups. Tart Cullens in their place had never been closer. I ran to his chamber and didn't even knock, just flung the door open. Arrow. His head peeped out from a stack of books. Yes, my young Felix. I allowed a chuckle. Everyone was young to Arrow. We need to talk about the human. Arrow tsked and shook his head. Felix, she has a name, and it is Bella. Please do try to call her that. Girl is so ordinary. Then he sat on a chair and gestured for me to sit in the one next to him. So, about the GI Bella, I said. He nodded for me to continue, and I told him everything she had said to me. His face grew solemn, and he nodded every so often to show he understood. This is very serious, Felix. The Cullens have flaunted our ways for too long and they must be taught a lesson, and I don't like the things they say about us to the other vampires. He added. I nodded and stood to go. Oh, and Felix. I turned and looked at him. Yes, Arrow. Please go check on Bella. She's crying. Quietly, but I can still hear her. Please make sure she's all right. I grimaced and stepped out into the hall, shutting the door behind me. I walked slowly, much slower than normal. I didn't want to see her. I hadn't meant to bruise her or hurt her ankle. Holy hell, I hated her. I was going to get in major trouble if Arrow found out I'd hurt his fragile little human. Why had he made me take care of her anyways? He knew what a ladle temper I had. It had gotten me in so much trouble before. I finally came to a stop in front of Bella's door and pushed it open silently. She was sitting on the windowsill, her legs dangling outside. One arm was holding the wall. The other was wrapped around the divider of the window. Her shoulders were heaving, and every so often I could hear a sniffle. Holy thumbs of God, what am I getting myself into? This is not going to end well. I'm either going to turn her before she's ready, break her fragile body, or drain her dry and kill her. And whichever happens, I'm going to catch hell from someone. BPOV. I felt a presence in my room, but I wasn't going to look away from the beautiful lights of Volterra twinkling in the night. I knew who it was anyways. I'd heard him cursing loudly to himself outside my room. After a few moments, I cleared my throat, and without looking away from the beautiful night view, I spoke. "What do you want, Felix?" I asked softly. He cleared his throat. Quote, "Eros sent me to check on you. Are you okay, Bella?" I turned around and hopped down off the windowsill and flinched in pain when I landed on both feet. My ankle I'd forgotten. I pulled my right foot up slightly to take my weight off it. He raised an eyebrow and walked over to one of the chairs and flopped down. I didn't know vampires could flop. I fairly growled. His crimson eyes turned black then flicked back to red. I made no indication that I noticed I'd irritated him. I hopped over to another chair and flopped down as well. These chairs were extremely comfortable. The corners of Felix's mouth tugged upward ever so slightly in a humorous smile. "What's so funny?" I demanded, glaring at him. That quickly made his smirk vanish and he shook his head. "Nothing. I just find amusement in watching you hop around on one foot." I drummed my fingers on the arm of the chair, the beige velour soft beneath my fingertips. "I'd imagine one would find amusement in their handiwork," I mumbled, then continued, louder. "When is Victoria getting back? I would imagine she'll be eating all night. God knows how long it's been since she fed, and it's a miracle she didn't eat you." He inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly. "Shit. It's a miracle I haven't bitten your pretty little neck," he said, his tone short. "Good Lord, Felix," I whispered. "If you hate me so much, why are you still in here?" His answer did nothing to ease my mind. "I have no clue," he stated simply, but he made no move to leave. I yawned. He tilted his head and watched me. "What are you staring at?" I inquired indignantly. "I don't watch humans much. Usually the only thing I see is terror before they become a meal." He responded. "Are you tired, G.I. Bella?" As if in response, I yawned again, and nodded. I stood up, more careful of my injured ankle now, and went to hobble to the bed when I was suddenly scooped up into a pair of cold arms. I looked at Felix, shocked. "What are you doing? Put me down," I hissed. He acquiesced and put me down on my bed. "Tomorrow morning you are to dress, eat, and come immediately to the throne room. Arrow, Keys, and Marcus will be waiting," he said, then left my room. The next morning, I woke up and stretched, yawning. The sunlight streamed through my window, and I nearly caught my breath in the beauty of it. It seemed I'd been too wrapped up in Edward to even notice the simple things in life anymore. My heart ached at the thought of him. I nearly jumped straight into the air when a loud knock sounded at my door. The door opened before I could even open my mouth, and in stepped Victoria, wearing a simple white sundress. Her red hair falling down past her shoulders. "Good morning, little swan." She smiled and sat on the end of my bed. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded. "Yes I did, thank you. Did you eat well last night?" She nodded in turn and smiled. "Makes you less tempting. Not that I ever would, but you do smell wonderful." She chuckled. We sat there giggling like two old friends for a couple of minutes. "Bella, I am going to stay here for today, but I am a nomad. I don't do well with staying in one spot, so I'm probably going to take off tonight." Fright must have shown on my face. Because she moved to reassure me. "It's not forever, little swan. I'll be back quite often to visit, and I finally got a cell phone, so I'll always be a phone call away. I have a feeling you and I will become good friends." She smiled gently. I heard another knock at the door and Felix walked in, carrying a tray of food: scrambled eggs, bacon and bruschetta. I flushed in embarrassment as I realized I was fairly drooling. He put the tray in front of me and regarded me for a moment. "I will return in 30 minutes to take you to the throne room. I trust that is enough time to eat and get dressed." I nodded in reply to him. And true to my word, 30 minutes later I was dressed and ready to go tell my tale to Arrow and his brothers. He returned, picked me up in his arms, nodded for Victoria to follow him. And off we went to the throne room. "What is the meaning of this, Felix? Why is my dear Bella not walking of her own accord?" Felix shrugged. "It was quicker this way." He went to set me down in a chair that Jane had brought. His shoulder accidentally bumped Arrow's. He stiffened, and I looked from him to Arrow. Arrow's eyes had gone black. Oh shit, Arrow probably just saw what happened last night. I barely had time to curl myself into a ball before I was being held upright by keys. Arrow's delicate fingers pulled my shirt away from my shoulder. The silence was split by an ear-splitting roar as Felix was thrown across the room. Arrow sped to the other side of the room and picked up Felix again, tossing him at my feet. I looked at Victoria, the horror in her face reflecting my own. Arrow stepped towards Felix slowly, menacingly. A growl in his throat. I looked behind the thrones and saw the wives. I hadn't even noticed them there. They too wore similar expressions of shock and horror. I looked at Keys and whispered, "Stop him. Please." He looked at me, let me go, and shook his head. Before I knew what I was doing, I had thrown my body over Felix's, and looked at Arrow and cried out, "Don't hurt him." Arrow pulled himself up short. Looked to Marcus, then to me. His eyes were red again. "Dearest Bella, I am merely punishing him for what he did to you. This is not appealing to you, I presume." I nodded, keeping myself around Felix. "Well, as much as I could. Like I said, dude is huge." Felix looked at me, shock written in his features. I couldn't look away, and my hand lifted itself and placed my fingers against his cheek. "What the hell?" I pulled my hand away after shaking my head at myself. I looked to Arrow, who wore a bemused expression on his face. "I provoked him, Arrow. It was really my fault. Please don't hurt him, at least not any more than you already have, please," I whispered, tears threatening to fall from my eyes. Arrow looked confounded. "Well, doesn't this just confuse the hell out of me?" he said resignedly. "Dear Swan, you can get up and sit back in the chair now. Felix, you might as well help her." I rolled off of Felix, and he stood, then reached a hand out for me. I took his hand and he pulled me up, murmuring, "Be careful of your ankle, Bella." His tone had a gentler quality to it and he offered me his arm. I looped my arm through his, but not before looking at him, confused. He merely shook his head and helped me over to the chair. I sat down, and he placed a hand on my shoulder, letting it rest there a moment before he went back to his place along the wall with the rest of the guard. Arrow looked at Marcus. "I must meet with you later for a game of chess, dear brother." Marcus nodded his assent, and Arrow turned back to me. "Now, to the matter at hand, dear Bella. You told me last night that you have come to Volterra to honor the conditions set forth in exchange for the permission for Alice and Edward Cullen, and yourself, to leave Volterra alive. Please tell us why you have not been turned by a Cullen, and why they are not here as well," he said. I gulped, and looked to Victoria. She gave me a reassuring nod, and I began my story. Of how after we had left Volterra, Edward had taken me into the middle of the woods and left me there again, stating he was too dangerous for me, and stating once more that I was not good enough for him. I told Arrow and his brothers of how I attempted to find my way home, only to get hopelessly lost, of how Victoria found me, and was going to kill me. Arrow's eyes flew to Victoria, and he beckoned her forward, and held out his hand. Victoria took his hand, and Arrow closed his eyes briefly before he looked at me warmly. He looked again at Victoria. "Victoria, this is truly amazing. Please share this with everyone else." Victoria looked to me, then to the other gathered in the throne room. Well, my mate, James, had smelled Bella before Edward left her the first time. Here I flinched and drew my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around my legs. He was a tracker. He followed her to Phoenix, and nearly killed her before the Cullens killed him. I was enraged, and I set out to make Edward hurt like he'd hurt me. I'd kill Bella. Here I happened upon her, lost in the woods. I was all ready to kill her and she apologized to me. She said she was sorry for her part in my mate's death, that she'd be pretty mad at herself too if she were me, and then she says, "At least you know your mate loved you, mine's just left me here to die." I couldn't kill her then. If he'd been able to leave her, and then I got mad. How I are responsible to leave a human out in the middle of the woods at the mercy of whatever, or whomever, she came across. I couldn't kill her. I couldn't even be mad at her. Victoria finished. I felt more than a few pairs of eyes on me. And after a moment, I lifted my head up. They were all staring, some with mouths agape. Arrow came over to me and knelt in front of me. "Bella, you're incredibly selfless. My brothers and I have much to talk about. We admire your integrity in coming here to honor the promise you made to us, and we will turn you, but in due time, young dear." He stood and beckoned to Felix. Take Bella to her room, or elsewhere if she so desires. Get her some lunch and make sure she gets some fresh air. Felix nodded and came over, scooping me up in his arms. We were almost at the door when Arrow's voice rang out. Oh, and Felix. Felix turned and looked at Arrow. Do try and not break Miss Swan. You'd regret it, he said sardonically, looking at his nails. Felix nodded and sped back to my room. He set me down gently in the chair, then picked up the chair and moved it, and subsequently me, next to the window, which he then opened. I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face as I inhaled and smelled the Italian summer air, all the flowers, fresh cut grass. I hope this is one smell that never changes after I'm turned. I didn't notice that Felix had pulled the other chair to the window, facing me. Until he sat in it and just looked at me. I looked at him until it got uncomfortable, then looked away, my gaze drifting out the window again. Bella, Felix said. I sounded, still gazing out the window, watching some butterflies that were flitting among the roses in the gardens. What the hell happened back there? He asked, his tone a mix between incredulous and awestruck. I turned and looked at him. I had no clue what the answer was. Hell, I wanted to know the same friggin' thing. Holy crow, this was going to be awkward. BPOV. I looked at Felix, who was already looking at me. I felt slightly uncomfortable under his piercing gaze. I shrugged. I was just going to play it off, because I sure as hell didn't want to even think about what I'd done. My actions said I had a soft spot for him, though every fiber of my being hated him. I shrugged nonchalantly. Bah, I just didn't think it fair for you, Almighty One, to be punished because I'm a fragile little insignificant human. I said flatly. Felix stood up and came over to me, then knelt before me. His eyes met mine and I held his gaze for a moment, then shifted my eyes elsewhere. He stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. Thank you, was all he said, and before I could reply, he was gone. Stupid vampires and their super speed. I HMPHED and crossed my arms across my chest. I stood, and hopped over to the bed, laid down, and fell asleep. I was startled out of my sleep when I heard screaming. I hobbled to the door, and pushed it open. Limping, and moving painfully slow, I followed the noise down the hall. I know everything's down the hall here, to an unimportant-looking door. I pushed it open, and bit my lip to prevent myself from screaming in fear at the sight I saw. The Volturi feasting on a large group of humans. I felt my eyes widen, and I noted, with relief, that there were no children. In fact, all these people looked really scruffy. A gentle breeze blew into the room, and suddenly I saw what I guessed to be about 17 pairs of black eyes fixating on me. I couldn't move. I was frozen in my spot. Keys licked his lips and slowly started moving towards me. FPOV. I was feeding when suddenly the most delicious smell I'd ever caught wind of assaulted my nostrils. I inhaled deeply. It smelled familiar. I knew I had smelled it before. But I was so overcome by frenzy of feeding that it didn't click. I glanced over, saw Keys lick his lips and start slowly making his way towards a young woman with long, glossy brown hair and brown eyes. No, 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 said my frenzied mind. I want her mine. Mine, 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 mine. I saw the others watching everything unfold. Everyone had black eyes, crazed with wanting to take in that sweet, overpowering scent. And before I knew it, I had launched myself over the drained corpses in front of me, and it was an even bigger shock when my feet moved me to intercept Keys. No, I ached, my throat burned though I'd had more than my fill of blood. Feet, go the other way, towards her, I want her. I pushed Keys away, growling angrily. The jolt of the realization that a guard had attacked a member of the Volturi brought Marcus A.N.D. Arrow back to reality, and with a fear in his voice I'd never heard before, called out, "Stop, Keys. It is Bella. Bella." I whipped around, and looked at her. She stood in exactly the same position she'd been when I first saw her. I hadn't known it was her. She had an eerie look in her eyes. Apparently Alec hadn't heard Arrow. He crashed into her, grabbing at her, and a fraction of a second later I'd plucked him off of her and tossed him towards Jane. And then my feet were moving again, towards Bella, who was on the floor in a crumpled heap, her hands shakily fluttering at the back of her head. I knelt on the floor beside her. "Bella, say something, talk to me." Her eyes met mine, and they were wide with terror and pain. I tried to keep my voice even. Arrow would surely be infuriated if I made this any worse. Bella. No response. She just stared at me, her expression unchanging. What do I care? I don't. She's just a human. And I've probably scared her half to death. Arrow's gonna kill me. She's still scared. Just walk away. Felix the first started to push myself off the floor when a warm hand grabbed my forearm, and I looked at its owner. Get me out of here, Felix the first. Want to go to bed? It's really cold in here. Her voice was slightly slurred. I pressed the heel of my hand to my forehead, then nodded and picked her up in my arms. I looked at Arrow. This was not my fault, Arrow. BPOV. He clasped me in his arms and I turned my face into his chest. I hated him, but he was the only one I felt safe with right now. He hadn't looked at me like dessert. I felt so dizzy and nauseous my head felt like it was going to pound itself to mush from how hard it was throbbing. Oh hell's bells, I feel like I'm gonna barf. Everything seemed to be shrouded in blurriness. I heard him speak. This was not my fault, Arrow. No, it wasn't. Felix, you were right in protecting Bella. That was not me. I meant to have her blood to myself. Something made me interrupt Keys's progress. We might need a doctor to look at her head. The voices drifted off into the fog that was coming down over me. Every muscle in my body suddenly went slack and all I could hear was bits of sentences. Bella. From more than one mouth. I was moving, didn't know how. Didn't really care. I was vaguely aware of being put on a bed. It may have been my own. And I drifted. And the voices, a feathery voice talking in murmured tones to a doctor. A crystalline voice soothing me as hands rubbed my muscles, and one I knew it was different because there were no words. Just a strong yet gentle hand holding mine and more voices. Bella, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't get to you quick enough. Then another voice. I'm very sorry for hurting you. Bella, Jane's not forgiven me yet. She keeps shocking me. Please wake up. The voices changed, but one remained the same. It belonged to whomever was making sure the blankets were adequately covering me, ensuring that the doctor knew every bit of progress, or lack thereof, I was making. The voice attached to whomever it was that would answer every knock at the door, the one who I always felt sitting on the edge of the bed. A finger would brush over the back of my hand and then that hand would become suddenly cool as it was enveloped in another's hand. And then that deep, rich voice would plead softly with me. Wake up, please, I'll be more careful with you, I swear it, just wake up. That voice broke my heart. I wanted to wake up so it wouldn't sound so unhappy. My conscious mind had been shut up, and I was acutely aware that my subconscious had a soft spot for that voice. Soft spo. I hated him, but I didn't. Felix, oh lordy, I have to wake up. I fought against the fog, willing myself to slowly wake up. I have to wake up. Don't be sad. Felix, hate me if you must, but please, oh God, please don't sound so sad. My toe twitched. I struggled some more. I could move my leg. A crystalline voice spoke. Felix, her leg moved. She's waking up. Keep talking to her. A pair of lips pressed to my ears, whispering gently. Bella dear, come back to me. Please, I'll never fail you like that again, I promise. Just come back to me, I'm begging you. He wanted me to come back to him. He wanted me. I parted my lips and breathed in softly, but audibly. After what seemed forever, I opened my eyes, and as soon as my conscious mind came back, it was silenced by the utter look of sheer, unadulterated joy. Why shining in Felix Volturi's blood-red eyes. FPOV. I am most definitely going to hell, and I most certainly do not care about that. I sighed almost silently. At least I didn't want to kill her anymore. Nope, don't want to kill her. Who no? I want to turn her. That's my blood. I sat by Bella's bed for a week. Jane had handled Bella's father. She hacked into Bella's email account and responded to his emails. She had Bella's tone down. I had to give her that much. Arrow assigned me to babysitting duty, to keep watch over the unconscious human. Victoria postponed her departure from Volterra to help. Well, not help. There wasn't much to do. She just murmured soft reassurances to the girl and she rubbed Bella's arms, legs, shoulders. Helps keep the muscles from weakening, she'd said. I'd let the doctor know there was no change. She was breathing, mumbling here and there, but that was about it. He'd wanted to take her to the hospital, but even Arrow would not take the risk and paid out exorbitant NT sums to bring the best medical care to the castle. I sat on the edge of her bed, studying her. In less than 48 hours, this puny human girl had turned my world upside down. She hated me almost as much as I hated her. Yet she'd potentially put herself in the path of a furious arrow so I wouldn't get hurt. Stupid contradictory humans. I snorted to myself and absent-mindedly traced a finger over the back of her hand. I could have sworn I felt her hand move. I clasped her hand gently in mine, studying for any signs of consciousness. Nothing. I growled and shook my head. I sat with her for hours bef. Or I realized I'd never let go of her hand. Arrow POV. I knocked on the door to my brother's chamber. "Come in," Marcus's gentle voice called out. I stepped inside and shut the door, glancing past an impressive stack of books. Looking for my very wise, observant brother. I found him in a corner, chess table all set up. "I know you are not here to play chess, brother," he said, "but I have it set up in case the fancy strikes you." I sat down across from him in a leather executive chair and sighed. "What troubles you, Arrow?" he asked. I lifted my hand slightly into the air in confusion. "Felix hates Bella. He called dibs on draining her when she was here with the young Cullens the first time." I paused, struggling, for once in my life, human and immortal, to find the words. Marcus waited. This is why I liked him best. He was patient, never rash, and therefore I could count on his counsel more than any other, even that of my mate. Yet in an amount of time just shy of 2 days, he's gone from N. Early breaking Bella to attacking our own brother to keep her safe, yet when I assigned him to watch over her, he was infuriated. "I am extremely confused, and would like you to tell me what you see bet. Wean my strongest guardsman and the little human who will soon be joining our coven." Marcus waited to see if I was done speaking before he began speaking. "When Edward and our little swan first came, I was shocked by the intensity of their bond. However, Arrow, do not confuse intensity for strength. Their bond was extremely fragile and mostly one-sided." I nodded, and I could feel the understanding dawning on my face. "Young Cullen never loved our little bird, did he?" Marcus shook his head and continued. "The bond between Bella and Felix is deep, so deep it is hidden and manifests itself in strange ways. On the surface, they hate each other. But in times of dire circumstances, such as what happened in the throne room, and what transpired in the feeding room, the subconscious takes over, and acts. This is why she threw herself over him and cried for you to stop, and it is also why, even though he was frenzied with bloodlust, his feet pulled him to intercept our brother. His conscious wanted that blood. His subconscious took over and protected her. Their bond runs deep, rings true, and is stronger than any bond I have ever seen. Not even Chelsea could rend it asunder." I pondered this for a moment. "Should we tell Felix?" Marcus shook his head. "We should not tell either of them, let them discover it for themselves, which they will. A bond like that cannot be denied forever. I have a feeling this will be a joy to watch." Quote, "What should we do about the Cullens?" came my next question. Marcus sighed. "Let us wait until Bella is changed to deal with them. She is rather accident-prone. Nay, and I would hate for something to happen to her at their hands. You know how Edward is about his humans. I wonder if he's got another one already." I thought out loud. Marcus shrugged. "Who knows? But this must be stopped. Once and for all. Not just for our secrets, but for the sake of those humans he comes across." I nodded in agreement. "We will discuss this with Keys at a later time. For now, our main concern is Bella," I said, then stood up, bowed to my brother, and excused myself from his chamber. FPOV. Victoria came into the room and sat down on the opposite edge of the bed from me. She gazed at Bella for a moment, her face saddened by the still figure laying between us. "I hope she makes it, flop." Was that my stomach? I had this sudden feeling like I had a bunch of ice-cold water in my stomach. I shook my head and hissed softly. "I really don't care either way," I said to the red-haired vampire. Her eyes flashed black for a second, then back to red. "That's really horrible to say. Especially since she saved your sorry ass from at the risk of her own life." She spat. I growled at her. "Oh, and you're much better. You were intentionally hunting her with the sole purpose of ending her life." Victoria looked at me and raised her hand to smack me, but instead, she leapt off the bed and flew out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I looked at Bella. I was so confused. Said I had been nearly sick with desire to drink her blood, and yet I had gone after Keys instead. Made no damn sense. "You are infuriating, girl," I growled, and nearly fell over in shock when a low moan escaped from the human's slightly agape mouth. I quickly checked for any indication that she was coming too. Nothing. Damn it, girl, you threw yourself over me when I was about to get my ass kicked for hurting you. You survived being in a room of thirsty vampires who were all caught up in the bloodlust, but you can't shake off a little sleep. I said disdainfully. Maybe you should try a little kindness, Felix. A flat feminine voice said. I turned to look at Jane. You know, catch more flies with honey and all that. She stated. Hell, do it for Arrow. He's very interested that her gift is already evident. And she's not even turned yet. She walked over beside me and looked at me. Your eyes are black. You need to feed. It's been 3 days now. I shook my head. I'm staying here. It's my duty. Yes. And it's also your duty to not kill the human. She retorted, and tossed a bag of blood from our private blood bank to me, then left as well. Nobody stayed long. An unconscious human is incredibly boring. I drank the blood, then checked the mirror. My eyes were red again. Ick. Not as bad as, say, animal blood, but still very disgusting. Nothing beat blood from the warm source. More flies with honey, Maybe. I leaned down towards Bella's ear, and her scent nearly knocked me over. My throat flamed up. It would be so easy. I opened my mouth to bite her, but words came out instead. Wake up. Please, I'll be more careful with you, I swear it. Just wake up. I clapped a hand over my mouth. What the hell was that? If I were 2 people, I'd annihilate myself. Victoria walked back in, her eyes fairly glowing from having fed. She went to the edge of the bed and began rubbing Bella's feet. So what have you been doing? She asked. I've been watching her, like I've been ordered to. And I've been talking to her. That last part came out in a hushed, almost shamed tone. Victoria raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just kept rubbing, when suddenly she gasped. Felix, her leg moved. She's waking up. Keep talking to her, she exclaimed. I bent closer to Bella's ear. If more mushy crap like before came out, I didn't want the ginger to hear it. My lips almost unnoticeably brushed her ear, but I didn't pull back. For some reason, I went to tell Bella that she was in a shitload of trouble with me when she woke up. Needless to say, that's not what came out. Bella dear, come back to me. Please, I'll never fail you like that again, I promise. Just come back to me, I'm begging you. Ah, hell's bells. If I couldn't even throw a good insult at her, I might as well not fight against it. And besides, I couldn't ignore the feeling that my stomach was jumping into my chest when I heard a soft intake of breath, louder than the silent breathing I'd been getting used to. I looked at Bella's face and I didn't even bother holding back the happiness I felt when 2 pale eyelids drew back from their treasure, a pair of warm brown eyes looking into my own. BPOV. Say something sarcastic, Bella. My conscious mind screamed at me as I gazed into Felix's eyes. My subconscious was positively whooping in delight. That joy is for me. He's happy because I'm awake. Bella, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Shit, Felix, you look like hell, I murmured, but tempered my biting remark with a warm smile, and simultaneously lifted my hand to his cheek. He snorted. You don't look that great yourself, girl. He growled as he leaned his face into my hand. Suddenly he was pushed away by an ecstatic Victoria. Get out of here, Felix. Go get the others, she screeched. Felix scrambled to his feet and bolted out of the room. FPOV. I ran down the hall. Hey, why don't y'all play a drinking game? Every time I say, down the hall, in this story, take a shot or drink a beer. You'll be drunk in no time. Yelling the entire way. She's awake. Bella's awake. Arrow. He stepped out of his chamber and grinned. Excellent news, my young Felix. He sped off towards Bella's room. I heard a whoop of glee as Jane busted her door off its hinges and ran out, fairly dragging Alec behind her. Come on, you slowpoke, she cried, hoisting him to his feet. He brushed his coat off and looked to me, raising an eyebrow. Alec was my closest friend. Right behind Keys, and Alec and I had a way of communicating without really talking. I knew he'd heard the happiness in my voice. I growled lowly. Don't ask me right now, I barely know myself. He nodded and ran to catch up with Jane, who was entering Bella's chamber. Speaking of Keys, the first was at his door, and I lifted my hand and knocked on the door. Enter, came his reply. I stepped into his dojo, as he liked to call it, and walked to his den area, sitting on a very soft velvet lounger in front of his fireplace. He sat down on the loveseat. Listen, Keys, I am sorry about what happened in the feeding room. He waved his hand dismissively. No, I'm just curious as to how you managed to protect her. Your eyes were more frenzied than mine. He replied, intrigued. I shrugged. I still don't understand. Keys, the first saw you move towards her, and all I could think of was getting to her faster so I could have her. And instead, I attacked you and then picked Alec off of her. I could talk to Keys about anything, he was like a brother to me. He listened as I continued. And then Arrow ordered me to keep watch over her while she was out, and I was so infuriated. And just today I thought she had moved, so I leaned closer to her, and her scent made my throat ache. I went to bite her, but words came out instead. I swore to her that I'd be more careful with her and pleaded with her to wake up. Victoria came back in and felt her leg move and told me to keep talking to her, so I leaned in and I wanted to tell her she was in a shitload of trouble with me when she woke up, but instead, I begged her to come back to me and promised her I'd never fail her like that again. Keys had his hands pressed together, his fingertips touching his chin. I heard the joy in your voice. Felix, how did you feel when she woke up? I felt like part of me that had been dead woke up. I replied. He regarded me for a moment and nodded, as if in understanding. But your conscience hates her? He asked. I shook my head. I don't hate her anymore. Still don't like her too much, but I don't hate her. We were interrupted by Arrow bursting through the door, a look of impatience on his face. Felix, Bella is asking for you. He'd barely gotten the sentence out before I was out the door and running back. Wait for it down the hall, booyah. I flew into Bella's room, plucked Jane gently off the bed, and sat down. What is it, Bella? Her eyes flickered around the room and her mouth slightly pulled down at the corners. I understood and looked to everyone who had gathered in her room. Everybody out, I hissed. Victoria, go with Athenadora and get Bella something to eat and drink. Alec, go with Jane and buy Bella some new clothes. Arrow and Marcus, go play some chess or something. Arrow fixed a bemused expression on his face and chuckled. You heard him. Everyone out, he boomed as he left the room. After everyone had left, I stood to leave, and was stopped by a warm hand on mine. Not you, came her soft, whispered command. My subconscious crowed in ecstasy. She wants me to stay. Me, BPOV. I placed my hand on his to stop him from leaving. Not you, I whispered. He sat back down. Bella, I placed my finger on his lips and shushed him. I'm sorry, Felix, I'm sorry for being the reason you attacked Keys. I'm sorry for teasing you. I may not like you very much, but I don't hate you anymore. And I'd like for us to try and be friends. We're going to be spending a long time under the same roof, and I really don't want any enemies. FPOV. Don't apologize, Bella, I looked at her. My subconscious fairly screaming at me. I'm just glad you're okay. I mean, Arrow would have killed me if you weren't. I looked at her and continued. Don't get it twisted though, Bella, in that feeding room. My only conscious thought was that I absolutely had to have your blood. But something else moved me to knock Keys off course. She looked at me, her hand still resting on my cheek. I turned my face into her palm and inhaled deeply, and my throat did not ache in response. I gently took her hand in mine and kissed her fingertips. I heard her breath catch in her throat and I was nearly blown away by my subconscious response. I want more. Felix, it happened to me too in the throne room. My conscience was screaming at me not to do what I did, but all I felt was dread and T's overwhelming sensation that I couldn't let anything happen to you, she whispered. I watched her for a moment, and she bit her lip. We didn't have any time to discuss anything else as Keys burst into the room. A look of shock on his face. The Cullens are here. Edward's done it again, he growled. BPOV. I looked at Felix, and he gave me a reassuring look. Edward's done it again. What does he mean by that? I had no time to ponder. As Felix hoisted me into his arms, leaning down to murmur in my ear. I will keep you safe, my little swan, please do not doubt that, but young Cullen needs to learn his lesson. Do you trust me? I nodded, and buried my face in his chest. He carried me out of the room and handed me off to Arrow's mate, Sulpicia. She ran her hand over my hair. I'm going to help you get ready. My dear, your nightgown is not proper attire for a hearing. She took me into her room and sat me down in a chair and began tenderly brushing my hair. Jane and Alec came in. Alec was loaded down with bags. He dropped them on the floor and flopped into a chair. Jane set out taking the clothes out of the bags. I was relieved to see a ton of jeans and cute yet simple shirts. I know you like casual stuff, so that's what I got, she said simply. She then went into another bag and pulled out a beautiful plain white dress and a deep purple, almost black, really, hooded cloak. Hearings are formal, so I'm sorry. But you'll have to wear a dress, Jane explained. You will stand along the wall with the guard, between Felix and I. We will protect you. You will wear the cloak, with the hood up. The shadow will hide your face. The piss-poor lighting in the throne room will disguise all but your heartbeat. They will know we have a human here, they won't know it's you. Alec will anesthetize their sense of smell so they won't recognize your scent. They have another human toy of Edward's with them, so be prepared. Please try not to react to anything. If you need to, hold my hand, or hold Felix's and squeeze if you must react. She finished, as Sulpicia twisted my hair up in her hand and fixed a butterfly clip to it. All done. I must go join Arrow, my dears. Jane, you will help her dress. Jane nodded, and Sulpicia swept regally out of the room. I like her, I said, and Jane chuckled. She is a powerful friend to have, but she has no enemies. We all love her. She replied. I didn't peg you to be such a happy person, Jane, I said apologetically as I stepped into the dress. It fit me perfectly. It was fit snugly down to my waist where it became loose and hung down, brushing the floor. You've only seen me in hearings. I have to be business in the throne room. But you'll see. We're going to be friends, I can tell. Her face grew serious. Bella, you're going to learn some things in the throne room that may shock you, but don't react. Please understand that Arrow, Keys, or Marcus, or any of us guards, will answer any questions you may have after the Cullens have been dealt with, she said. I nodded, and tied my cloak. Jane pulled the front of the hood down so that it partially shielded my face. Beautiful, Jane said, then took my hand. It is time, she stated. FPOV. I stood along the wall as Arrow spoke to us. Bella, Jane and Alec will be joining us in a moment. Gianna has the Cullens preoccupied in the waiting room out front. They will come in after Bella has come. She will stand between Jane and Felix. Jane has told Bella that she is not to react to anything she learns in here today. Bella is impervious to Edward's mind reading. Afton will block the rest of your thoughts from the young Cullen. The door opened and 3 hooded figures stepped in. I recognized Bella immediately, and she shot me a shy smile. She walked over and took her place beside me, Jane flanking her other side. Little Swan, are you ready? Arrow asked tenderly. She nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Arrow nodded. Alec, I want it so that the second they walk in that door they cannot smell. Afton, block everyone, now. Arrow turned and strode over to his throne and sat down. He looked to Heidi. Go bring them in. Heidi nodded and left. The silence in the room was deafening. And the door opened again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Cullens and a human walked in. Squeeze. I looked down and saw Bella's delicate hand in mine. I placed my other hand over hers, reassuringly, and whispered, don't let go, just squeeze when you need to. Squeeze, squeeze. I smiled, but the smile quickly vanished as I looked to the Cullen coven. Arrow. Edward admonished. I can't smell. Oh. Read thoughts. Shock spread across his face when he realized there were 2 heartbeats in the room, that of his human, and that of mine. My human, I thought, gently squeezing the hand in mine. There is another human in here, Arrow? Carlyle asked. Arrow nodded. She is in the process of joining our guard and is to be turned at the end of the week, but the important question, my dear Cullen, is why? The beautiful brunette your son brought last time is not here. Has she been turned as we commanded? Squeeze. The movement caught the pixie-looking girl's attention and she looked at me, then her eyes shifted down to our interlocked hands. Never pegged you for a human lover, Felix. She sneered. I nearly growled, but I was stopped by 2 squeezes from the woman beside me. I relaxed. She's going to be turned at the end of the week. She's as good as vamp now. I shot back. That shut her up, little meddling pixie bitch. Then Edward spoke. We turned Bella, but her newborn bloodlust overcame her, and she attacked a shapeshifter from the Quileute tribe. They destroyed her for breaking our treaty. Edward sighed. I was shocked at the bold-faced lies he was telling. Squeeze. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. I glanced over Bella's head at Jane, who had surreptitiously placed her hand on the small of Bella's back, gently rubbing circles. God, I wanted to be able to speak some words of reassurances. I hit upon an idea. And I bent down to whisper in Bella's ear, in a tone so low it would be heard by only her. My dear, do not let what you learned today affect your opinion of yourself. You are beautiful and worthy, and we all love you. I murmured, my lips brushing against her ear. Squeeze. FPOV. Arrow glanced at Edward and lazily spoke as he looked at his hands. Oh. Well, that's a shame. So why do you have a new human here? She came to stop me from asking to have you destroy me, and my family followed her here. Edward sighed. The human beside him was of slight build, with long black hair and her eyes nearly matched her hair color. She peeked out from behind him before ducking back again. He made no protective move toward her. Squeeze. Tisk. That's a shame. Arrow chided. Are you going to turn her too? Edward shook his head. No, she does not want this life. Arrow clicked his tongue and looked to Keys. Squeeze. A shame, young Cullen, because you know what this means. Does your human know what this means? Edward nodded, and stepped away from the girl. He'd brought her here, knowing she would die for refusing to be turned. I'd thought he was a monster before this only sealed it, and I inconspicuously moved my thumb across the back of Bella's hand. Her one finger twitched and gently moved over my fingers. Do you even want to know her name, Arrow? Arrow shook his head. No, I do not. The pixie, Alice, if I remembered her name right, stepped forward. She was just as horrid in my eyes. I could see the human was dressed in a similar fashion to Alice. She had on a white turtleneck underneath a black sleeveless puffed vest, and a pair of black stonewashed denim jeans. Where Bella favored flare and boot-cut legs, this girl had on skinny jeans. Arrow. Where is Dimitri? I do not see him here. Arrow waved his hand dismissively. Dimitri is off taking care of a couple of lawbreakers. He will return tomorrow morning. Why, Alice, are you in the market for another mate? Is Jasper not good enough for you? Or has he simply gotten too much free will? How dare you? Alice spat at Arrow, but he only snorted derisively. How dare I, Miss Cullen? How dare you? You go right along with Edward. D's game with no thought to the safety of the humans. In fact, wasn't it you who showed him how much fun it was to mess around with humans? That's what you do, yes. Oh yes, dear Alice, I saw it when we touched when you and Edward were here with that delectable brown-eyed beauty. You find the most complacent humans because complacent, lost vampires. Here Arrow stopped and fixed a meaningful gaze on one I assumed to be Jasper, who in turn looked confused. Arrow continued. Lost vampires didn't interest you anymore, and you try to mold the humans you find into what you want them to be. You force them to dress like you, walk, talk, and act like you, and when they show the slightest inclination that they might not turn out to be perfect little subservient playthings, you discard them. He was nearly shouting in her face now. And then he whirled to face Edward. But what she's done is not nearly on par with the sinful things you have done. Edward, you've been an exemplary example of the pupil outshining the teacher. Have you not? Oh no, Edward, you play with their hearts. You think it's amusing to see the lengths they will go to stay with you, to hold your love, and when they've completely remade themselves for you. When they are at their most dedicated, one of your dear siblings loses control and tries to attack, and you use that as an excuse to leave. But you don't leave, do you, Edward? Oh no. You silently watch in the shadows, getting some sick satisfaction of seeing just how broken you've left them. How many times has a human of yours gone to a mental hospital? Edward moved behind his human and ducked down behind her. Coward, I thought. But Arrow wasn't finished yet. And if one happens to figure out what you are, then this, Arrow gestured to the human girl, who was shaking horrifically. This happens, and they are doomed before they even know what hit them. And in an elaborate ruse, you led them here, and they either choose to be turned, or they don't. And if they don't, we kill them. Edward and Alice stood as still as stone as collective gasp was sounded by the rest of the Cullens. Oh, this was a shocker to them. I almost laughed, until I wondered how Bella was taking all this. I waited for the squeeze and it didn't come. I glanced at her and saw her biting furiously on the inside of her mouth. Thank God, if she bit her lip it would have been a dead giveaway. Her entire body was trembling. I exchanged a worried look with Jane, then squeezed Bella's hand. No response. I squeezed again, a little more demandingly. She broke her trance and squeezed back. I sighed in relief. Arrow paced back and forth, Marcus looked irritated, for the first time in his eternal life since the passing of Didymu, and Keys was clenching the arm of his Thrawn. With so much force that every so often I would see a minute amount of marble dust shower off. I am shocked, young Cullen, that you moved on so quickly from what was her name again. Edward looked at him, confused. Bella, he replied. Look, Arrow, no offense, but this isn't anything new to you. You know this is how I like my life. Squeeze. Without even making a sound, I understood the questioning in her grasp. How in the world could I understand her without her saying a word? I replied, just as silently. Squeeze. Arrow's eyes flickered black. Yes, except usually you're humans, the ones who figure out what we are. Decide to join our lifestyle. We keep them while they're newborns, we teach them how to fend for themselves. Then we send them to one of the other covens. Arrow paused, glanced over towards Keys, and nodded. Edward gulped. I could smell fear coming off of him. It was not news to us that Alice and Edward Cullen had been playing around maliciously with vulnerable humans, but it as apparently news to Jasper. He roared and launched himself at Alice, and just as quick, was pulled out of the air by Keys. You, Jasper, are innocent, do not render yourself guilty. He growled. Jasper looked down at the floor and nodded. Then looked at Alice and roared. You sick, twisted little bitch. You and Edward used me. I was always the excuse. Oh poor weak Jasper lost control and almost attacked another human. I always listened to whatever you and Edward said. Good God, you two are evil, evil little siblings. His voice trailed off to a whisper, and he went to stand along the opposite wall. Arrow looked over to Jasper for a moment, then back to the other Cullens, who were standing in a shocked silence. Edward, your air quotes toy here will be dispensed with, but this will not happen again. I mean it. I am done cleaning up these little affairs. Arrow commanded. Edward nodded. The human let out an audible gulp, but made no sound. Arrow quirked an eyebrow. Does she not speak? He asked. Rarely. Edward replied. Can we not do this in front of another human? He asked, gesturing to Bella, though he didn't know it was her. She is becoming one of us, Edward. Your games weary me, Arrow said absent-mindedly. Games? I play no games, Arrow. Edward sighed. Arrow looked at him and stepped closer to him. Edward shrank back. Don't touch me, Arrow. He spat. Arrow raised his hands and halted his approach, then turned to Chelsea. Chelsea dear, please get Edward's toy out of here and make sure she doesn't scream. Arrow commanded. Chelsea gave a curt nod, and walking over to the girl, she obeyed her arm and fairly dragged her out of the throne room. Arrow stepped closer to Edward. If you play no games, then why do you feel the need to lie to me, Cullen? He hissed. Edward looked thoroughly lost, and shook his head. I don't know what you mean, care to enlighten me. He sneered imperially. No. But you are not going to leave here alive. As Arrow's words sank in, before anyone could react, I growled as the hand I was holding was wrenched out of mine, and when I found her, she was being held fast by Edward Cullen in the center of the throne room. Her hood was still hiding her face. Edward looked at Arrow. One more step and your precious little human gets it. He exclaimed. Arrow looked to me and I shrugged. My subconscious was going crazy. That is my human, Cullen. It roared, and that primal roar found its way up my throat and out of my mouth. Edward looked at me, and grinned evilly. You should know, Felix, when you called dibs on Bella. Her blood was exceptionally wonderful, you would have enjoyed it. I almost laughed at his words, always a pathological liar. Then I growled when he shook Bella. Her hood fell back from her face and the clip holding her hair came undone, her brown hair tumbling down over her shoulders. Recognition flashed over Edward's face, and he dropped her in shock as it dawned on him that Arrow had known all along that he'd been lying to us, and as such, his fate was sealed. I seized my opportunity and lunged at him, as did Arrow, Keys, Jane, and Alec. Afton's block dropped and I didn't even notice that the Cullens were still frozen in shock. I reached him first, and wrenched him around to look at me. I'm sure it will be delicious when I turn her. You will never be good enough to drink her blood, you blasphemous asshole. I hissed as I tore his head off and tossed it into the fireplace. Alec and Keys made short work of the rest. And I looked over at Bella, only to see Alice Cullen in the air in a direct path towards Bella. I moved to get her, but Jane's hand stayed my movement. She smiled wickedly, and said flatly, pain. Alice fell to the ground, screaming. Die, bitch. Jane whispered. Alice was on the ground, writhing in agony when Jasper pulled her up. Relief washed over her features until he spun her around to face Arrow, who tsked at her. Alice, you would have been such a welcome addition to the coven, but no one attacks our allies and gets away with it, he said furiously as he walked over, tore Alice from Jasper's arms, and threw her to the floor, placing one foot on top of her head. She squirmed, and he pressed down. She stopped struggling. We vote now. My family spare her or not? Arrow asked. Marcus put his thumb down, and he was followed by Keys, Alec, Jane, myself, and even though he wasn't a Volturi yet, Jasper also put his thumb down. Arrow looked to Bella. My little swan, you have a vote too, since you will be joining us, he said. Bella walked over to me and grabbed my hand, gently pulling me over to Alice. She knelt down and looked in Alice's eyes. If Alice had any chance at mercy, she'd need to convince Bella. Bella could sway even Arrow with her tears, but Alice cast her eyes away from Bella's. Dumb move, Pixie, I thought. Bella's next action surprised me. I'd never seen her truly angry. She spat in Alice's face and hissed, "Burn in hell, you treacherous cunt," as she simultaneously turned her thumb down. Roar. Arrow hesitated, then turned his thumb down as well. Keys and Alec, please take care of this disgraceful thing, Arrow said, then looked to the Cullens. Keys and Alec grabbed Alice and exited the throne room, with the little bitch struggling and hissing the whole way. You are all free to go. If you wish, you may stay until Bella's debut as a Volturi, in 2 weeks' time. Please be more careful of what you allow to spread about us. All you'd ever heard from Alice and Edward were lies, and I do not appreciate the libelous things you have spread about my family and me. Nomads and other covens talk, you know, he informed them. I felt a hand in mine again and Bella looked at me. I picked her up in my arms and kissed her hair. Heidi, show the Cullens to a guest room. Heidi nodded and showed them out of the throne room. I looked at Bella and murmured softly, let's get out of here. She nodded, a grateful look on her face as we sped out of the throne room and haha, I couldn't resist down the hall lol. To her chamber. I put her down on the bed and sat next to her. She grinned impishly. What? I asked. Her grin grew larger. You said, we all love you, Felix, she laughed, then teased me. You love me. You think I'm pretty, she taunted. Holy hell, yes I do. You are infuriating, girl. I growled, but my subconscious put a warm tone behind my growl, so it only made Bella laugh harder. I need silence to think. I need to hush her up. And I shut her up the only way I could think of at the moment. I kissed her. Mine. FPOV. More. Take more, Felix the first just couldn't. It was a soft, gentle peck. But it shut her up real good. BPOV. I touched my lips in shock. Okay, I looked at him and saw that he was gazing at me. Bella, you need time to process what you've learned, I PPED him by putting my hand over his as I looked down at my bedspread. It had suddenly become extremely interesting. Felix, I whispered, what are we doing? He tilted his head and put his finger under my chin and lifted my eyes to meet his. I have no clue, my little swan, but I can't fight it anymore. Part of me wants to just sit here and say something smart about how petrified you were in there. And part of me wants to beg your forgiveness for not being able to do more to reassure you. And the part of me that wants to be a jerk and a smartass just gets quieter by the hour. He said, his voice low and hoarse. Want a cough drop? I cracked, laughing weakly. He shook his head and smiled. No, I want you, he said, his voice tinged with a note of irritation as he stood and left the room. FPOV. Marcus, I yelled as I strode here we go again down the hall and around the corner to his room. By the time I got there, the door was opened and Marcus stood in the doorway. No need to shout, young Felix, come in, he said. Nice to see you aren't a vegetable anymore. We should have let a human stay here long ago. I hissed. He chuckled jovially. Maybe we shouldn't have let one stay here at all. It's nice to see you can still act like a brat, he said warmly. A flash of guilt ran through me. Forgive me, Marcus, I am frustrated, irritated, and confused. I shouldn't take it out on you, I said, laying a hand on his shoulder as I walked past him to his sofa. BPOV. I was sitting on the windowsill looking over the Tuscan. Volterra is in Tuscany. Seriously, Wikipedia it. D countryside, pondering to myself. Every so often my fingers would touch my lips. I could swear I still felt his pressed gently to mine. The door opened and Jane walked in, followed by Victoria. I glanced over, and went to stand. A whimper forcing itself from my lips when my right foot hit the ground, sending pain shooting through my ankle. It was getting better, but it was still difficult to bear any weight. Jane flew over and picked me up, setting me down in a chair. "We will build a window seat here for you, since you like to look out the window. It'd be safer than sitting on the narrow windowsill," Jane said with a smile. "Thanks for buying me all those clothes and thank you for getting stuff I'd feel comfortable wearing," I said. She shrugged. "I don't try to mold people into what I want them to be," she said. The reference to Alice was not lost on me. Jane chuckled out loud and I looked at her. "Treacherous cunt, I like that. I may have to use that on a lawbreaker someday." I allowed myself a weak chuckle. I was mad, though infuriatingly mad. Alice had been my friend. No, she wasn't. Bella, a friend, would never do that to another friend, I thought to myself. And this is why I was mad. It was all a lie. I wasn't even fit enough to deserve the truth. Felix's words in the throne room were lost in all the anger and hurt. I wanted to scream. So I did. Quote, exclamation mark, quote. I screamed, a scream filled with anger, burning rage. Out of control fury, and beneath all of that, the most horrific, heartbreaking pain I have ever known. Victoria and Jane ran out of the room in shock. I didn't care. I kept screaming. FPOV. A scream split through the castle, interrupting Marcus's refusal to tell me what he saw between Bella and I. His head snapped up and he looked to the door. I heard 2 sets of fast, heavy footsteps. Jane, I knew her frantic run anywhere. "You have to figure it out for yourself, Felix," Marcus said again as he stood and ran to the door to fling it open, muttering under his breath, "Don't want to lose another door." As he flung the door open, Jane flew in, then her gaze fixed on me. "Go," she fairly screamed at me. She didn't have to tell me where to go. I was running good lord, down T. Hall and nearly crashed into Arrow and Keys, who were standing with the rest of the Volturi guard outside the door to Bella's room. I growled. "Why is no one in there to comfort her?" I asked impatiently. Arrow lifted his hands in caution. "We dare not. She will not see any of us. We tried," Arrow said, resigned. I growled again. "Not everyone has tried. Stay here," I commanded, then pushed open the door, and once I was in, I shut it behind me and locked it. When I looked over to Bella, I nearly died in agony. I could feel her pain and it killed me. She was looking at a picture of the Cullens and screaming at it. I wasn't good enough to deserve the truth, was I? I wasn't worthy of you and your precious, demented little clan, was I? Her breath caught and she crumpled to the floor. Her next words shot through me like arrows. I wasn't good enough to be left alone, was I? I was plain enough and stupid enough and easily manipulated enough that you all let him play his little twisted games. Why? Oh, you even allowed Alice to play. You all left me so broken and shattered, and here I thought you all stayed away because you all assumed I was moving on, but they knew how broken I was. You left because you didn't care. There is nothing real in my life anymore, is there? I walked over to her and picked her up. She fought against me. Go away, she cried. I will never leave you alone to hurt and despair like this. BPOV. Go away, I cried, fighting against Felix's grasp. He held me tight, but did not hurt me. Bella, he crooned softly. Don't you remember what I said to you? I stopped and looked at him, then hissed. Lies. It's all lies. Felix, I'm not stupid. Everything was all a lie. I sobbed. I'm only allowed here because I'm keeping my word. No one cares about me. It was all a show to Tiak. Edward, his lesson. There is nothing real for me left in this life anymore. I would have kept going, but I was interrupted by his hands grasping my shoulder. He shook me hard, but not hard enough to hurt anything. Shut up, Bella, be quiet. Mon cher, and listen to me. There is nothing real for you. What about me? I am real, Bella. I am real, and I am here, and he paused and I laughed bitterly. You what, Felix? You can't even say it because it'd be a lie, I said coldly and flinched when he smacked me across the face. I looked in his eyes, and shrunk away from him in fear. They were black. He crept towards me. Do not accuse me of lying to you, Bella. I am not scum. Arrow is not scum. Jane is not scum like those Cullens. He came closer, and I took another step back. FPOV. Her eyes grew wider with fear as I stepped closer to her. If only she knew my eyes are not black with anger. BPOV. Felix. I stammered, taking a step back. Do not, ever, accuse me of lying again, Bella. He hissed. He caught hold of me and I whimpered in fear. And do not ever fear me, I would never, ever, do anything to hurt you. He said lowly, a gentle growl in his throat. He placed his face near my throat and breathed in deeply. Then pressed his lips tenderly to my skin. Shock ran through me as I realized what was happening. He's kissing my throat, he's not biting me. He drew back and looked into my eyes, his were still black. I was so confused. I would never harm you, Bella, because I love you, and I am real. He whispered. I stopped struggling. What? I asked, my voice caught in my throat. Are you really going to have me say it again? He teased. I nodded. You are infuriating, girl. He murmured into my hair. Is that your term of endearment for me? You say it a lot. I taunted. He pulled away and looked at me. His eyes back to red. Bella, do you feel the same about me? I moved my face closer to his, so I was mere millimeters away from his face. He breathed in, and his eyes went from red to a very dark red. But I didn't pull away. Yes, Felix, the first love you. I whispered as I pressed my lips to his. FPOV and BPOV. Dibs. BPOV. Felix. I breathed softly, pulling back. He looked at me tenderly. Yes, my little swan. I chuckled inwardly at the nickname everyone around here seemed to call me Little Swan. I grew serious and contemplative before I continued. I need to talk to the Cullens, there's no way they were all in the dark about this. I said. He nodded. Would you like protection? He asked me, and I nodded. Who would you like to come with you? I looked down at my hands. Well, Jane and Alec and you, if you can promise to only defend me if it is absolutely necessary. Not one hair on your head will be harmed, mon chéri. He whispered. A knock came at the door, and Felix went to open it. And Arrow swept in. He came over to me and took my hand in his. He couldn't read my thoughts, so I knew it was just a genuine gesture of kindness. My young Bella, you would not be here if we didn't want you here, promises or no. He said warmly. Felix nodded his agreement. But perhaps this confrontation can wait till morning. Yes. If you'd like, we could bring the all to the throne room. It won't be a hearing, just a place where there's enough room for all of us, and we can all be there should something happen. Felix shook his head. No, Arrow, I know you were T-side this whole time. I don't want Bella to think she's being used to make an example out of the Olympic Coven. I interrupted him by placing my hand over his. No, it's okay. I know I'm not being used. I was just really angry and hurt, I still am, but maybe this will give me answers. I need closure, I said quietly. Felix rubbed his thumb over the back of my hand. Are you sure, ma belle chérie? He asked. Bien sûr, I said, and winked at his expression of shock. I took French. I explained, grinning. He growled at me playfully, and I burst into peals of laughter. Arrow smiled, and turned to Sulpicia, who had come into my room as well. My room. I liked the sound of that. My dear Sulpicia, young love is indeed a joyous thing to witness blossoming. Arrow said to his mate. She shook her long shiny red hair out and grinned. Indeed it is, Arrow. All conversations were interrupted by a loud growl in my stomach. And then it hit me. I was hungry. Felix stood up, then bent down and gave me a soft kiss. I will go make you something to eat. What would you like? I grinned. Some crepes would be wonderful. I said shyly. I assumed, from his frequent use of French endearments, that Felix had been French in his previous life. Or spent a good deal of time there in his immortal life, and crepes were the only thing French I could pull off the top of my head. I must have assumed correctly, because his eyes widened slightly. And then a huge grin spread across his face as he left the room. Arrow looked at me again, then to Sulpicia. My love, I must go and speak with my brothers. Do you mind helping Bella if she requires it? Sulpicia shook her head. Not at all, my dear. She smiled and walked over to my vanity. She looked through the drawers, T.S. King to herself every so often, and I had a feeling it was because they were so empty. Bella, we will have to get you some proper furnishings for this room. It is yours now, and as such, you have the right to furnish it as you see fit. Jane and Alec will. I'll take you out tomorrow after you meet with the Cullens, she said, her tone friendly. She plucked a brush off the top of the vanity and came over, sitting behind me on my bed. She gently brushed my hair out. You have such lovely hair. Isabella. Sulpicia murmured as she gently pulled the brush through my hair. I still had a sore spot from where my head had hit the marble in the feeding room, and she was very careful at that spot. She pulled back my hair and turned it into a thick twist, then flipped it up and I felt a comb being pushed into my hair. She feathered the hair at the top, and the end she picked me up in one arm and carried me to my closet. It was empty as well. Jane. Sulpicia called loudly. A split second later, Jane flew in. Yes, Sulpicia, she asked, smiling at me. I smiled back and waggled my fingers in a shy hello. Please bring me Bella's clothes. I opened my mouth to protest, but was shushed by Sulpicia's finger over my mouth. Jane nodded and ran out. Sulpicia, you're like the queen of vampires. You don't need to help me dress, I'm just a human. Her peal of laughter silenced me. What on earth did those vegetarian Cullens tell you about us, my little one? She laughed, then shook her head. I am no queen. We are a family, even the guards call everyone by first names, and you, my dear, are joining our family. You are one of us, even if you have delicious smelly blood running through your veins, and I love doing the girl's hair. It almost makes me feel like I have a ton of daughters, and I am proud of every one of them, including you, little Isabella. You were very brave in the throne room today. Quote, I didn't feel very brave, Sulpicia, I said as another knock came and Athenadora and Jane strolled in. Athenadora gave me a warm smile, and set some bags down on my bed. Jane set the rest on my bed. And then they put all my clothes away with such speed I could barely see the flurry of movement around me. You may not have felt brave, but you acted brave, and that is half the battle. Sulpicia said wisely, and Athenadora and Jane nodded their assent. Even my husband was impressed with your composure, Bella, and Keys is the king of the poker face. Athenadora laughed. Jane stood by my closet. You can get used to the setup of your closet later. Tell me what you want to wear and I'll get it. I smell crepes cooking. Jane teased jovially. Grawl said my stomach. The women all laughed, and I found myself laughing along with them. Light blue stonewashed denim flare leg and a gray off-the-shoulder sweater. I asked. I doubt she had gotten to know. She had. There they were in front of me. Jane laughed at my look of bewildered amusement. I nearly bought the whole damn store, she grinned. Sulpicia pulled the sweater over my head in a Jew. Stead the collar where it folded over and set it just off my shoulders, then helped me step into my jeans. They were the right size too. Jane whistled. Felix won't know what hit him, she said gently. Athenadora looked at Sulpicia. Should we put some makeup or perfume on her? She asked. Sulpicia shook her head. No, Isabella has a soft beauty that seems to suit Felix, and God knows the scent of her blood is perfume enough. She replied. Jane took my hand. Hungry? She asked. I nodded and followed her out of my room, Sulpicia and Athenadora right behind us as we passed doors. The rest of the Volturi joined us one by one. Keys, Alec, Marcus, Arrow. Jane smiled to herself, her eyes drifting sideways to catch mine, and she shot me a conspiratorial grin. We reached a smaller room and stepped inside. By Volturi standards it was very small. By my standards it was the biggest kitchen I'd seen in my life. Oh Felix, Athenadora sang out. Your guest of honor is here. She flashed a smile at Keys, who moved to her and took her hand. Then glanced at me with a friendly smile of his own. Felix turned around, and nearly dropped the plate of crepes he was holding. He set them down and walked over to me, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He tossed it over his shoulder. It landed perfectly on the counter right as he wrapped his arms around my waist and kissed my forehead. Vous êtes beau, mon bel ange. He whispered into my ear. APOV. The light of the setting sun filled our castle with a warm golden light as I strolled with my lovely wife, Sulpicia. How is Bella faring? I asked her. She looked at me and smiled tenderly. And touched my hand. I saw Bella and Felix through Sulpicia's eyes, both of them sitting in the library in the glow of the sunlight. Felix's hands and face glimmered in the light, and he was watching Bella, who was sitting with her legs tucked under her body, her face bent down as she read a book. Felix had a look in his eyes, a look of peace that I had not seen in all his time with us. He listened to her attentively, and at one point, he placed his hand over hers, which caused Bella to gaze up at him, adoration and love shining in her eyes. The vision ended and I looked down at Sulpicia. She smiled knowingly. You can see it with your own eyes, love, it is beautiful. She murmured. I nodded, speechless, as she tugged at my hand gently. I followed her lead as we walked along the corridor and past the great open atrium that served as our library, and the sight I saw nearly knocked me over. It was just as I had seen, yet seeing it with my own eyes I could have sworn I heard a choir of angels singing softly. In the light of the setting Tuscan sun, Bella could not have been more resplendent even if she had been a vampire, and Felix's normally angry and bitter face had softened as he gazed at her. Completely absorbed in her, they were both oblivious to us. I bent down to Sulpicia's ear. My love, go fetch Marcus, Keys, and Athenadora. I think their hearts may be gladdened immensely by this sight. Marcus most of all. She nodded, and with a quick kiss to my cheek, she sped off. I turned back to our dear little swan and my strongest fighter. Jane almost yelped as she bumped into me. I'd been so enchanted by what I saw that I hadn't even heard her coming. I pressed a finger to her lips, and silently pointed into the library. Her eyes grew wide and her mouth opened slightly. I could understand the surprise. It genuinely felt like the air around us was heavily saturated with the strength of their bond, but Marcus would know best. I felt a hand on my shoulder and glanced over to see my wife. She smiled and I turned, in time to see Marcus and Keys coming. I pressed a finger to my lips, as I had done with Jane, and pointed. Marcus did not need me to. However, his entire face lit up and he smiled, his first genuine smile in an eternity. We kept our voices to a whisper, so that we would not be heard. Marcus, it is as you said, is it not? I asked. Marcus nodded. And he looked like he would have cried if real tears would have come. It is even stronger than before, Arrow. It is so strong we can feel it. He replied. Did they know? Keys queried. Marcus shook his head. No, they know they love each other. I do not think they realize just how deep their bond is. He responded. MPOV. Marcus, please come, you must see this. Sulpicia said, fairly pulling me out of my chair. I allowed her to pull me along the corridor, as Keys and his wife followed us. I turned a corner and was smacked senseless by a pervasive feeling of I couldn't even think of the words to describe it, but love. Loyalty, adoration, dedication, and strength. What was I? Arrow looked at us and pointed to the library, where in the golden glow of the setting sun, sat Bella and Felix, reading together. Had I not been around for enough centuries to know that magic simply did not exist, I would have thought there was magic in the air. Somewhere in me, a warmth began to make its way through me. I wondered if that's what that empathic Cullen felt whenever he was around happy people. And then I saw it, enveloping them like a sheer, faintly glowing curtain. Their bond, it was soft, subtle, and simple, and truer than anything I have ever seen. I stepped to Arrow silently and touched his shoulder. He gasped at the beauty of it. All of us were in complete and utter awe, even Keys and Athenadora. She looked at me, her eyes wide in wonder. I wish I was human right now, for I would weep at this. She whispered, and I nodded in agreement, and I saw quick nods from my family. Felix had not had an easy life as a mortal. And he'd not had it much better as an immortal. We'd found him during the Inquisition years, in an alley in France, nearly dead of a sword wound. Part of the blade had been broken off in his torso. Throughout his time with us, he'd only let bits and pieces slip about his mortal life. He'd been orphaned at a young age, his older sister taking on the role of mother to her 8 siblings, who ranged in age from 12 to 3 months of age. His father had died 2 months before the youngest was born. His mother died of childbed fever 7 days after giving birth to her last child. He was 6 when his oldest sister died, giving birth to twins. They followed their mother into the afterlife shortly after that. Felix and his siblings were split up and put into a home for orphaned children which weren't known for their hospitality. All but one of his siblings died in the orphanage of various diseases. His sole surviving sibling was drowned at sea at the age of 19. And after he was turned, he didn't fare much better. He was always angry and bitter that he alone had survived his entire family. He'd adored his oldest sister, Marie, as a young child. She was the only mother figure he could remember. And losing her devastated the family. Felix remained an enigma to most of us, but as I watched Bella reading to him, it dawned on me that she might be more instrumental in bringing Felix the peace and calm that had eluded him thus far, than any of us could even imagine. SPOV. My beautiful daughter, so beautiful as a human, so kind and selfless, and my son, my defender. The man who'd risked his life to keep my husband and me safe from harm. I smiled. I'd had reservations about allowing Isabella to remain here while human. I insisted she be turned immediately. I am glad I was overruled. I doubted that it would have played out so beautifully any other way now. CPOV. Marcus, Arrow and I were sitting by the fire when Felix burst in. I couldn't help myself. I smiled at him. Good evening, Felix, I said kindly. What can we do for you this evening? Bella is all right, yes. Yes, Keys, she's sleeping now. I wanted to ask you something concerning Bella's turning. At this, Arrow looked to him and Marcus smiled, as if he knew what young Felix wanted. Of course, my child, what is it? Out of the three of us, Arrow had the most interest in Felix's emotional well-being. He knew what it meant to be a tortured young vampire, and though Felix had been a vampire for a little over 500 years, he had never found the peace and calm that was now written all over his face. Marcus had definitely started showing signs of life stirring within him since Bella's arrival. This would need some pondering at a later time. Felix looked to Arrow and dropped to his knees. I beg you, Arrow, let me change her. She trusts me more than anyone, he said hoarsely. Arrow's eyebrows shot up. How can you assure us that you will be able to control yourself? Arrow asked. Felix looked up at him. Because I have no control over the fact that I cannot harm her, he said simply. Arrow looked to me, and I put out my hand, palm up, in a sweeping gesture. It was his call, but I believe Felix would not harm the human. He looked to Marcus, who nodded and said, he cannot harm her, Arrow. It doesn't permit it. Felix looked confused, but I knew what Marcus meant. The bond he saw between Felix and our little swan would not permit him to harm her. Felix seemed to know that he could not hurt Bella. He seemed confused as to why. Arrow looked down at Felix, who had an expectant look on his face. He placed his hands on Felix's shoulders. You shall turn her, Felix. BPOV. I had woken up to the birds chirping outside my window, which was open. I hadn't remembered leaving my window open, so I turned over in my bed and saw Jane sitting on the sill, her legs stretched out along the ledge, her face looking out the window. She turned her head to me and smiled. I thought I heard your heartbeat pick up a little bit. Good morning, she said. I grinned back at her. Like my windowsill? I asked. She nodded. I see why you like gazing out the window. I hadn't really noticed what beautiful views we have here, she said, then hopped down. She handed me a letter from Victoria. My little sister. For that's how I see you, Bella. I hate to leave like this as a nomad. It is hard to stay in one place for long, and the next time I see you, you will be a newborn. I only hope that remnants of your human life stay with you, like how you take such joy in the simple beauty of the world around you. I apologize for not being able to stay during your transformation. I had a very difficult and traumatic one, and that, coupled with my anxiety to not stay in one spot, would make it near impossible for me to stay. But do not see this as a goodbye. I've put my number in your phone, please call me often. I love you, my beautiful and kind sister, and I will visit you after you are turned. As soon as you get your bearings, you call me, and I will come. I miss you already. Love, Vic. I folded the letter and tucked it in my nightstand drawer. I was upset she didn't wait until morning, but I also understood why. It was well enough. I would see her again soon, and she was only a phone call away. I looked up to see Jane looking at me. Would you like some help dressing? Dimitri should be coming back this morning. Gee, we won't have our meeting with the Cullens until he does, she stated. I nodded, and got out of bed. She moved to pick me up, but I held a hand out to stop her. Just let me lean on you, Jane, I rather miss walking. She chuckled and came over to me, standing still. I put a hand on her shoulder and stepped forward tentatively with my bad ankle. I flinched. It hurt still, but it was getting better. We moved slowly over to my closet. I picked out a black zipper front hoodie with blue stars down each sleeve, and some scattered across the back, and a pair of dark blue flare leg jeans. She helped me put my sneakers on, and we made our way to the door. She had me lean against the wall while she opened the door, just as Felix was lifting his hand to knock. I was taking Bella to Sulpicia's chamber, Jane began, then turned to me. Explaining, she specifically requested the honor of doing your hair. Felix stepped over to me and kissed my forehead. I will see you soon, mon ange, he murmured. He then curtsied to Jane, making her giggle, which in turn made him chuckle, and then he was gone. Are you nervous? Jane asked me as we slowly strolled along the corridor. I'm nervous, yes. But I am more nervous about meeting Dimitri again. I said, continuing, I mean, everyone's been so accepting, welcoming, rather I hope he's the same. Dimitri will love you, like we all do already. Jane said. He has an odd sense of humor though. We had arrived at Sulpicia's chamber, and knocked gently. Entreto, I mie tesseri. She called, and Jane pulled the great door open, and we walked in. Sulpic. Ia came over and pecked both of us on the cheeks, then led me over to her vanity and sat me down in the chair and got out her brush. Today is a happy day, Dimitri is coming back. She said. I nodded. I'm sorry, is everyone always this happy? The brush stopped making its way through my hair, and then continued. We are sort of. You've definitely brightened things up around here, Isabel. I loved the way Sulpicia said my name, Isabella Isabel. I never liked being called by my full first name, but from Sulpicia, it sounded wonderful. So, you and Felix. She teased kindly, and I blushed. She laughed. Not to fret. Tesseri our Felix has been long deserving of the calm you've brought him. We were interrupted by the door being pulled open, and Keys stepped in. Dimitri has arrived. Arrow wants everyone in the throne room, where we will brief Dimitri on what has transpired here in his absence. He cast his gaze on me. Including you, little swan. No formal dress is necessary, come as you are. He said. Sulpicia finished brushing my hair quickly. Jane took my hand, and we were met outside Sulpicia's room by Felix, who took my other hand. How is your ankle? He murmured. I showed him by taking a couple of slow steps. He nodded and took my hand again when I returned to his side. We walked together, and he was unendingly patient when I had to stop every so often to lean against him and rest for a moment. I was determined to make it to the throne room on my own 2 feet. We finally reached it and walked in, taking the same spots along the wall that we'd stood in the day before. Felix took my hand in his again. It didn't escape Arrow's notice, and he fixed a tender smile on us. And then all eyes were on the entryway as Dimitri walked in. He glanced around at all of us, stopping when his eyes landed on me. Bella, what are you doing here? He said, more in shock than anything else. FPOV. I watched Dimitri's shock spread across his face, and his eyes grew slightly darker as he took a step towards Bella. I pulled her behind me and let out a warning growl. I loved Dimitri like a brother, but I would not let him harm Bella. He put his hands up in the air and looked at me. Peace, my brother, I will not hurt her. He whispered, even more shocked. He then turned to Arrow. Arrow, what have I missed while I was laying down the law? He grinned easily. Arrow looked to me, and I felt Bella move to her spot by my side. Dimitri, you remember when we allowed Bella, along with Alice and Edward Cullen, to leave our home alive with the condition that Bella be turned, no? Dimitri nodded and Arrow continued. The Cullens left Bella alone, and she came to us to honor her word. Have the Cullens been dealt with? Dimitri asked. Arrow nodded. Felix, Alec, and Keys took care of Edward when he threatened Bella. Alice was going to be punished, but when she moved to attack Bella, we had no choice. Keys and Alec took her down to the dungeon and ended her. Dimitri nodded, taking in everything he was discovering. Burn in hell, you treacherous cunt. Jane whispered, so softly that only I could hear, and she chuckled. I fought a smile. When will Bella be turned? Dimitri asked. She will be turned 2 days from now. Arrow said, looking to Bella. If that is acceptable to you, little swan. Bella nodded. That sounds fine, she replied, her voice soft with nervousness. I knew he wasn't nervous about being turned. I surmised that she was just nervous about meeting Dimitri again. Dimitri walked over, looked at my face carefully for a moment, then took Bella's hand gently in his and kissed it. It is a pleasure to meet again the woman who is making my brother so happy. He said, looking to me and winking. It's good to see you again, Dimitri, especially so much more so now that I know you won't be tracking me. She replied shyly, a gentle smile on her lips. Dimitri guffawed. You are all right by me, little sister. His laughter made him shake, and I saw that the others were laughing as well. Bella is going to confront the rest of the Cullens shortly, Arrow spoke to everyone, as Dimitri stood on the other side of me, and I would like to invite Bella to sit on my chair while she questions them. We will get the truth today, and Bella wants to be the one who gets it. Bella raised her hand. Arrow smiled indulgently and gestured to her to speak. Might I have Felix and Jane be beside me? I feel very protected when they're with me. Arrow smiled and moved his head up and down. Of course, my dear, your sense of safety is paramount to all of us. He turned to look at his guard, his eyes resting on me for a moment. If anyone so much as makes a move towards Bella, take them out. He growled. He was answered by a simultaneous and synchronized nodding of our heads. He gestured Jane, Bella and I to the dais on which the thrones sat, and he helped Bella into the middle one. Jane flanked her left and I stood on her right, each of us resting one hand gently on Bella's shoulders. Arrow looked at Heidi. Bring them in. FPOV. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 Cullens and no human walked in. BPOV. I watched them from Arrow's throne. Jasper walked in first, never lifting his eyes off the ground. My heart ached for him. I was convinced that he was innocent. Rosalie then walked in, a look of defiance on her face. I didn't understand why she'd be like that until it hit me. She'd tried to warn me all her nastiness towards me was to drive me away. In came Emmett, his head hanging low, his eyes on the floor. Had he known? He was Rosalie's husband, I couldn't assume she kept him in the dark. And here they came, the enablers, Carlise and Esme. Carlisle had a confused look on his face, Esme had a defeated look on her face. They stood in a row, only Esme and Rosalie bothered to even look me in the eye. I was careful not to let the confusion flicker across my face, but I could still feel the rest of the muscles in my body tightening. I felt 2 hands, one on each shoulder, gently reassure me. Squeeze. I relaxed, and looked at Arrow. He held my gaze for a moment, and I raised an eyebrow at him expectantly. He cleared his throat. An unnecessary gesture, it was more for my benefit. Good day, Cullens, Arrow started, barely concealing the disdain in his voice. This is not a hearing, hence our casual attire. Consider this an interview. Bella will be asking the questions. And you are to answer truthfully to your best knowledge. If you lie, there will be consequences. He turned to me and made a sweeping gesture. The floor is yours, my dear little swan. I smirked, then looked to Carlisle. Carlisle. His head snapped up and he looked at me, and I was taken aback by the pain in his face. I stood up, gently shaking off the hands on my shoulders. Slowly, cautiously, I took the 3 steps to the edge of the dais. Felix seemingly materialized nearly in front of me, his hand held out. I took his hand and leaned on it as I gingerly stepped down. I noted myself that the Cullens were watching this with a look of awe. I looked at Felix and smiled softly. Thank you, mon cœur. I murmured. He smiled warmly at me and bowed. I almost laughed, but then I remembered that why I was here was no laughing matter. I limped over to Carlisle and looked up at him, then the rest of the Cullens. Carlisle, I am sorry for your loss. I know he was your son, and I cannot imagine the pain you must be feeling right now. I said gently, though I was loud enough for them all to hear. I must know the truth, for my own sanity. I did not ask the Volturi to slay 2 of your children. They did it out of love and concern for my safety. Here my family nodded, confirming my words. I smiled gratefully at Arrow and continued. It did not help that neither of them though. It prudent to tell the truth that may have saved them. I said, gathering every ounce of courage I had in me. I was nervous. I looked at Carlisle again. Carlisle, tell me, why did you leave? I asked. He looked to Arrow, then to my Felix, who shot him a wicked glare and a warning growl. I advise you, Carlisle, to speak only truth. I cannot guarantee what will become of you if you lie to my mate. He said harshly, then looked to Arrow. Forgive me, Arrow, it is not my place to say something like that. My heart was pounding. My mate, he'd called me his mate, and I'm not even turned yet. Happiness swelled up in my heart. And I thought I would cry tears of joy, but I forced my thoughts back to the matter at hand as Arrow spoke. No, Felix, it is quite all right, you have every right as Bella's mate. Arrow smiled knowingly. And I almost grinned. He'd noticed Felix's revealing choice of words as well. I looked at Carlisle expectantly. He fidgeted some, then looked at me. Bella, I say nothing but the truth is I tell you I merely thought my son had a thing for humans. I did not know of all these trips to Italy, only the one you were here for. I was blinded by foolish love for my first son, ith. Ought he could do no wrong. We left because he told me that your safety was compromised so long as Victoria thought you were his mate." Here Felix let out a soft growl. Carlyle faltered, then forged on. "He assured me that he had been in contact with Arrow, and that Arrow had said if Edward left you alone, and you agreed to never speak a word of our existence, that you could be left alone to live out your human life. I took him on his word. Bella, and I am sorry, I am sad he is gone, it hurts beyond all belief that he is gone, but I do not fault you or your family, for I would have done the same thing." I nearly gasped in shock when Carlyle Cullen dropped to his knees in front of me, his head bowed down. "I would have done the same thing, Bella, because the monster who toyed with you was not my son, for my son died long before he ever met you, when Alice, for she was no child of mine, showed him her sick games. Bella, I am sorry, and I am begging you to forgive me for my ignorance." I looked at Arrow, helpless. I hadn't expected this. Arrow walked over and held out his hand imperially. Without even looking, Carlyle took Arrow's hand. A look of hurt flashed over Arrow's face, and he knelt down in front of Carlyle. "Carlyle, you were my dear friend at one point, and I am sorry you have fallen victim to this terrible hurt." Arrow turned to me. "He has not lied to you, Bella, ever," he said meaningfully. My eyes widened and I knelt, wincing at the pain my ankle sent to me in protest, in front of Carlyle. "There is nothing to forgive where you are concerned, Carlyle. You did not know," I whispered. "But if my forgiveness would truly help you, then you have it, along with the love I always had for you as a daughter would love a father." And then I wrapped my arms around him comfortingly. Quote, "Please do not despair over what you perceive as a wrong you have dealt me. You did not know," I said soothingly. Arrow looked to Jasper. "You, young Jasper, do something, help your father," he said. Jasper shook his head. "Forgive me, Arrow. I cannot, my own pain is too great right now," he said sorrowfully. I took Carlyle's face in my hands and kissed his forehead. "Please do not despair, Carlyle, all is not lost. And you did the best you knew how to do," I said, looking in his eyes. He nodded, saying nothing, his expression never changing. I held out my hand and Felix helped me to stand. I hobbled down to Rosalie. She would not meet my gaze. "Rosalie, what is the real reason for your callous treatment of me when I was dating your brother?" That got her attention. She looked at me, shocked. "You knew, didn't you? And for whatever reason, you thought if you were mean enough to me, that I'd go away, but why? Were you that horrid to his other humans?" Rosalie flinched, and in a shocking move, she shook her head. "No, I knew of his games, but Bella, you reminded me so much of a childhood friend of mine growing up. As much as I would have loved to have you around forever, Michaela did not get to grow up. She drowned when we were skating on the ice pond. She was only 13. I felt I owed it to her memory to ensure that you lived your life, but yes, I knew of Edward and Alice's games." She looked at Arrow and said defiantly, "I know this means I will be punished, and possibly killed, but I don't care. That is not something we will discuss until later," was all Arrow said. "But I am not going to be living a human life, Rosalie," I said. "Does that still anger you?" She shook her head. "Yes and no. Mostly no, because I know you're making this choice of your own will, and not because Edward's psychologically manipulating you," she stated. "But you could have simply pulled me aside and told me," I said in a hushed tone. She snorted. "Would you have believed me, Bella?" she asked. "Probably not," I replied, and smiled. She gave me one back. I looked at Arrow, and he touched Rosalie's shoulder and nodded. "She is not lying, Jasper." Poor Jasper, I didn't even have to question his innocence. I took his hand in mine and patted it tenderly. He looked at me. "Bella," he began, but I made a noise for him to shush. "You owe me no explanations, no apologies. I am sorry for the loss of your love. Jasper, I know you loved her, and I know how much what you found out must have hurt you." Arrow moved to touch his shoulder, and I held up a hand as I shook my head. "I know, Bella dear, I know you believe him, but I must see. I cannot risk any harm coming simply because someone is a good liar and we don't see it coming." I nodded, and he touched Jasper's offered hand, then looked at me. "Truth, Emmett." He looked at me, then back down at the ground, and I knew he knew. The question bugging me was, if he knew, why didn't he warn me, or at least try to drive me away like his wife did? "Emmett, why?" was all I could choke out. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and instantly Jane and Felix were at my side. Felix with one arm around my waist, Jane holding the other. Emmett looked at me. Bells. I couldn't be mean, you're too damn likable. He exclaimed brokenly. He looked down. I tried to bring myself to be mean to you, I even had Rose help me practice, but I just couldn't. He mumbled. I just couldn't. I hoped maybe Edward would come around, maybe he'd really love you, and maybe Alice could really be your friend and not just mess around with you to see how horribly they could break you. I looked down at the marble floor. Ouch, that hurt. I drew in a shaky breath, and felt Felix kiss the top of my head. Arrow. I whispered hoarsely. Ouch. Oh ouch, ouch, fuckity ouch, this hurts. Arrow walked over to Emmett, then turned and walked over to me, and tilted my chin up so my eyes met his. Our dear, treasured little swan, sometimes truth hurts, yes. He said kindly, and I nodded. He wiped a tear off my cheek. But sometimes, when a leg breaks, it does not heal properly, so it must be broken again, and that hurt is a necessary step in repairing the wounds, is it not? I nodded again. I understood his allegory all too well, and a saddened expression crossed his face. Fear not, my child, for you are loved by all of us. You have endeared yourself to us all, and we are here for you forever. He said kindly as he kissed my forehead comfortingly. He turned, and held out his hand. I'd noticed that he only allowed the other Volturi to touch his shoulders to share their thoughts. Outsiders were offered a hand or Arrow would touch their shoulders. Emmett placed his hand in Arrow's, and Arrow looked at me after a moment. He is being honest, he said. That left Esme. Her expression walking in had set off alarms in my head. I had loved her as second mother. The thought of Esme betraying no. Do not think of it that way, Bella. Her loyalties were not to you. I shook my head. Esme. She looked at me and a quick sneer passed over her face. I wondered if anyone caught it, and I heard a low hiss from Jane, Felix, Keys, and Sulpicia. Yup. I sighed. Just get on with it. And don't lie to me. I am growing weary of all the pain and suffering that seems to abound within your family. Did you know of Alice and Edward's games? I said monotonously. Yes, I knew. And I encouraged it. Carlyle looked up and over at his wife. What? He exclaimed, and all the emotions that flashed over his face broke my heart even more. Hurt, anger, betrayal, despair. I flinched. Yes, I knew. And you know what? It was fun. When my baby died, I learned all too well how tenuously mortals hang on to life. And so many of them take it for granted. So I took them for granted, and then when I saw what fun Alice and Edward had, I decided I wanted in. And Bella, you were such an easy target. All your life you took care of your mother, and when you came to Forks, you took care of your father. It wasn't hard to forge a bond with you, all I had to do was mother you. Speaking of which, everyone expected me to be okay with having the children I had. But it was no replacement, or even a consolation over the loss of my baby. She looked at me and sneered. You, Bella, I hated you the moment I saw you. Alice and Edward just wanted to have their fun with you, and leave you broken and move on. I wanted you to die. I hate humanity. I couldn't kill humans for sustenance, so the next best thing would be to break them to the point of suicide. And it nearly worked on you, Bella. When Alice saw you jump off a cliff, I was thrilled. I didn't know she'd also seen you living through it and moving on with Jacob Black, so they lured you here in the hopes Arrow would kill you outright. I stood there, in silent shock as Esme poured out her hatred. Stop, I pleaded, whimpering. Stop it, I whispered again, begging. Felix growled, and his growl was soon echoed by the others. Arrow stepped forward. Felix, Jane, take Bella over to my throne, she needs to sit, he commanded, then whirled around to face Esme. And you said nothing to your mate? He asked incredulously. I do not love Carlyle. I never did. At first, there was some affection, but after a couple of years I couldn't stand it anymore. I wouldn't be growing old with him, I wouldn't get gray hair with him, and I hate everyone who can look in the mirror and obsess over wrinkles and age spots. She turned to Rosalie. You think you mourned your humanity. You wanted babies, and wrinkles. I had a baby, and he died. I had what you wanted. And it was taken from me. You mourned your humanity, I turned mine into hatred. I could deal with hate. I couldn't deal with the sadness. Everyone else who has ever lost a baby goes to bed at night knowing they won't hurt forever. I lost a baby, and when I tried to make it so that I wouldn't hurt anymore, I had that taken away, and it was turned into hurting forever. Hate is so much easier. She hissed. Rosalie looked taken aback, and looked at Arrow, whose eyes were black with fury. Alec, immobilize Esme. Heidi, Please show the rest of the Cullens to the waiting room, we must discuss this. I watched as Esme's eyes lost their focus and her hateful expression relaxed. Heidi led the shell-shocked Cullen family out of the throne room. Arrow looked to Keyes and Marcus as he paced in a circle round the large marble medallion inlay in the center of the room. I leaned the side of my head onto my palm and closed my eyes for a moment. This is sad. There is no word strong enough to describe how sad this debacle has become. I hadn't even realized I'd spoken until I opened my eyes and saw the eyes of the Volturi on me. My family. In the short span of 2 weeks, they had welcomed me with open arms. I looked over to Felix and open hearts. Arrow came to stand in front of me. Beloved child, please share your thoughts. I can't read them, you know. I allowed a weak smile at Arrow, but it faded quickly. Can we speak in front of Esme like this? It doesn't seem right, I said. Keyes answered me. Esme is immobilized. She cannot hear, see, smell, or talk. He stated. Please freely speak. Carly. SLE should not be punished for being blinded by his affection for his oldest son, I began. Jasper is wholly innocent and he was always kind to me. I don't care what you do with Esme. Emmett should not be punished. I wouldn't have believed if he and Rosalie had warned me anyways. And I do not think Rosalie's punishment should be harsh. Do what you will with Esme. I whispered, my voice still refusing to work properly. Arrow pondered this, then turned to Keyes and Marcus. Brothers? He asked, seemingly at a loss for words at what had just gone down in his throne room. Keyes shrugged. Our little Swan is very wise. I say we uphold the law, but Carlisle, Jasper, and Emmett should bear no consequence. We cannot fault them for a mistake. It was not intentional, and it is clear to me that the three of them hold Bella in high regard. Keyes said flatly, then looked to Marcus. I am in agreement, for once, with you on this, Keyes. The only thing Carlisle is guilty of is loving his oldest son to AF. All this is hardly a punishable offense. Young Hale knew not of what his mate was doing, and I think we can all agree that his actions in the throne room towards her more than proved that. We cannot fault Emmett for not being able to try and drive Bella away. She is a very likable young woman, as our Felix can attest to. This elicited a little chuckle. Arrow sighed. We cannot ignore our own compel. Since in this we turned a blind eye to Edward's transgressions out of regard for our Carlisle, something like this will never happen again. I watched as everyone nodded in solemn agreement. Arrow turned to Felix. What is your opinion, Felix? Felix looked down at me, then to Arrow. I too am in agreement with Bella, he said, glancing back down at me, his face full of concern. Arrow turned to Chelsea. Go get the Cullens and bring Heidi back with you. She nodded and left, returning a moment later. All of the Cullens slowly walked in, followed by Heidi. Arrow watched them thoughtfully for a moment. Cullens, based on what we have ascertained here today, some of you must face consequences for your actions. He walked to Carlisle and stood in front of him. Carlisle, amico mio, your despair weighs why? Oh, you down like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, yet you, along with Jasper, have the least culpability in this. Neither of you had any knowledge. You knew not because you were blinded by love. For your wife and your son Jasper did not know because he too was blinded by his love for his wife. There are no consequences for either of you, and you both are still considered friends of ours. He walked down to Emmett. Emmett, we cannot fault you for being kind to our Bella, and you have shown in your thoughts that you attempted to at least drive her away, or attempted to try. You leave here a friend as well, and you, Jasper, and Carlisle are welcome within the walls of Volterra anytime. Emmett looked to me, then to Arrow. May I go speak to Bella? Arrow gave his permission wordlessly, and Emmett came over to me. Bella, please forgive me, he said somberly. Emmett, you leave here a friend of mine as well. I understand why you made the choices you made. Besides, I teased him gently. You're just too damn likable. He gave me a shadow of his famous grin. Arrow fixed his gaze on Rosalie. Rosalie, your motives were well intended, but as they say, the road to hell is paved with them. Your punishment is that your hair is to be cut short, he ordered. I knew that Rosalie's hair would grow out in 6 months, but considering Rosalie's vanity, I thought it fair. And when your hair has grown out again, you too will be welcome within our walls as our friend, he added. Esme. Esme was next. I stiffened, and even though I knew she had to pay for the betrayals she had dealt to so many who loved her so much, my heart was pounding. And my stomach was doing flip-flops and knotting up in dread. Arrow took Esme's hand. One question, Esme, just one last question. Will you at some point with the proper help move past your grossly misplaced animosity towards the mortals? He watched her carefully, and I knew he would be reading her thoughts for the truth. Never. Esme spat. Arrow dropped her hand and stepped back. Alec and Dimitri, at a nod from Arrow, caught her by the arms and held her fast. Esme, you are a quandary. Should we let you live, we risk you traumatizing more mortals with your hatred. Though the punishment would indeed be fitting to make you live when you just want to die, and by killing you we give you what you want, he trailed off. He looked to Keyes and Marcus, who both shook their heads. Were they saying no to letting her live or no to killing her? Arrow understood whatever they were saying no to, and turned to Esme. You are a threat to our secrecy and to our way of life. You have broken your last mortal. For before the hour is up, Esme and Cullen, you will die. Arrow said ominously. I wanted to be anywhere but in this room right now. Everything was just spinning around me. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. This could not be happening. Almost as if he'd read my mind, Felix put his lips to my ear. Remember, Ma Belle, we love you and we are real. I am real. He whispered. Saltfish's words floated back into my head, as if in reassurance. You may not have felt brave, but you acted brave. I stood up and slowly made my way down off the dais and over to Esme, who was still being held by Keyes and Alec. She hissed at me and I raised my hand slightly, but did not move away. Esme, you may have hated me, but I loved you, and that was something tangible that could have helped you hurt less. Had you given it, or any of the love so many have shown you, a fighting chance. I cannot imagine the pain you must have gone through in your life to cause you to foster such anger in your heart. I hope you find the peace in death that has eluded you in both your mortal and immortal life. I gently said, not giving any outward indication that inside me I was a raging mess of fear, anxiety, and hurt. FPOV. My Bella is forgiving, almost too forgiving, but perhaps a belief in redemption isn't a bad thing. I watched her in amazement as she spoke to the woman she had loved like a mother, who had done nothing to Bella but betray her in the end. Bella had been right. No words would ever adequately describe how tragic the Olympic coven had become. Carlisle was a good man, who'd only had honorable intentions from the start, and everything he had built on compassion and goodness had collapsed horrifically. It made me shiver to see the broken man he'd become. I too RNED my watchful eyes towards Bella again. She was being very brave, but I got this sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't put my finger on it, until Bella turned to look at me. Her EYs fairly screamed out her anxiety to me. She was afraid and hurt, and I felt it vaguely. I wasn't feeling exactly what it seemed she was feeling. It was this overwhelming sensation that I needed to comfort her. But we were all frozen in place, watching Bella with awe as she spoke to Esme. I do not care for your false words of comfort, Isabella. Esme sneered. Bella hesitated for a moment, and growl sounded at the back of my throat. Arrow, just say the word and I will rip her apart myself for accusing my beautiful Bella of lying. I thought to myself. I looked to Jane, who was gauging my reaction. But I heard the growl at the back of her throat as well. What I did not expect was for Carlisle Cullen to snap out of his stupor, and walk briskly over to Esme. He drew back a hand and struck her across the face. You have no right, Esme Evanson. No right at all to speak to Bella like that, he roared. Arrow's face held a startled, yet understanding look as Carlisle raged against his wife. All she ever did was love you, love all of us. And even now, when you are the last person on earth she should be forgiving, she is still standing in front of you, offering your comfort that your vile, putrid black heart can never comprehend the magnitude of. He looked to Bella and reined in his rage. I'm sorry, Bella, he said, then looked to Alec. I think you'd better render me senseless before I kill that evil, vicious thing I once called my wife, he whispered ferociously. Alec, still holding Esme along with Keyes, glanced to Arrow, who nodded. Give him the momentary peace and calm he seeks, young Alec. Arrow said sadly. I watched as the patriarch of the Cullen family's face relaxed and his eyes unfocused. Arrow, came Bella's voice, soft and steady. Arrow looked to her. Yes, little swan, he asked. Bella looked to me, then to Jane. All of us. She walked over to Carlisle, and as I, and the rest of the Volturi, and beckoned Emmett, Jasper, and Rosalie over to her. They all joined her around Carlisle. Emmett, Rosalie. Jasper Carlisle is in immense pain and he blames himself for that over which he had no control. Please show him, not just now, but always, that he has done good in his immortal life, that while mistakes were made, he has had 4 wonderful and amazing accomplishments in his years. 1. He does not feed off of humans and the other 3 are each of you. At this, she wrapped her arms around Carlisle. And suddenly she was lost to our eyes in the midst of a group embrace, all of them sobbing, and I could hear my darling angel crying enough real tears to fill the eyes of Carlisle's immortal offspring. I heard a choked whimper behind me, and turned to see Athenadora and Sulpicia comforting one another. Bella's head poked out between Rosalie and Jasper. Arrow, please end. This already. This family has endured enough sorrow to put the oceans to shame with uncried tears. She pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Oh, how I wanted so badly to go to her and wipe those tears away. Yet this was not the time for me to do so. This was a moment between Bella and the remaining, innocent Cullens. Arrow gave his assent, an expression of heartbreaking pain etched into his features. I'd never seen him like that. Alec. Keys, take Esme to the dungeon and release her from her pathetic excuse of an existence. Carlisle and his children have suffered enough, they do not need to see this. Bella should not see this. They both moved their heads up, then down. Alec glanced to Carlisle and withdrew his mental anesthesia. I know you heard Bella, Carlisle. I did not block your hearing. Let the love you have be your comfort. He turned his face towards Esme. No one wants to even hear you. Granted, I think you should be alert for this, but the cares and concerns of those who will not be executed today matter more to me. He hissed as he completely numbed her. Alec had a very keen sense of justice, as his and Jane's mother had been burned at the stake, accused wrongly of witchcraft. He nodded to Keys, and they both led her silently out of the room. Carlisle looked at his children, who were still embracing him, with Bella sandwiched in the center, and slowly brought his arms up to hug them back. Marcus cleared his throat, and Arrow tore his eyes away from Carlisle to glance at Marcus. Arrow, we must converse with our brother later, he said. Indeed, we shall, Arrow began, and then so low that only Marcus could hear and myself, since I wasn't standing too far away from them, he whispered, this is a tragic day for Carlisle and his children, but even so, I believe we have witnessed something amazing in regards to Bella today. Bella slowly made her way out of the center of the Cullens, and limped over to me, tears still silently slipping down the porcelain slope of her cheeks. I tilted her head up to mine, and gently caressed the side of her face, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes were red from crying, and she'd been sobbing so hard that every so often she hiccuped. I kissed her eyes tenderly, and could taste the saltiness of her tears. I get how poets can say that someone's tears can seem to make them even more beautiful. Her eyes are red and puffy and she's as gorgeous as ever. Carlisle, Arrow said, walking over to him. What I said earlier still stands. You and your children are more than welcome to remain here until Bella's debut. Carlisle acquiesced, and then came over and stood in front of Bella and I. Bella turned so that she was standing at my side, glancing at Carlisle. Imagine my shock when Carlisle addressed me, not Bella. I need to tell you. Felix, you have a wonderful girl right there and she will be a good mate to you, he said. I shook my head up and down. I know, Carlisle, and she is a wonderful daughter to you. Never forget that. He smiled at me. Not in a million years would I forget. He replied. BPOV. I was back in my room, and holy crow was I mentally and emotionally drained. And beneath everything, I was shaking internally. I sat on my bed and sighed. I'd told everyone that I just wanted to be left alone for a while, that I needed time to think, and now I'd become stuck inside my head. I thought about the Cullens, how Edward, Alice, and Esme had reeled me in like a fish on the line, about how every laugh, smile, and good memory I had with them and how it had all been a lie, well, at least on their part. I thought about the Volturi from my experience in the throne room when I had been here the first time to save Edward, another lie, I had believed what he'd told me about them. I'd believed they were all strict but cultured people who did not allow for mistakes. The Volturi, as Edward portrayed them to me, would have killed or turned me the second I set foot within their castle walls to honor the condition they had placed upon me. But they weren't. They were all so wonderful to me. I thought about Felix, and the undeniable bond I knew existed between us. I couldn't define it, or completely put my finger on it, but it was real. This whole mess with the Cullens may feel surreal, but Felix is real, and he loves me. Sulpicia, Jane, Arrow, they're all real, and their actions just don't add up. Oh, what I've been told about them, I thought to myself. I shook my head at the internal confusion I felt washing over me. Maybe asking to be left alone wasn't such a good idea. I stepped off the bed, wincing in pain, and made my way to the door. I needed to speak to someone, anyone, and I had a good idea of where my feet would take me. APOV. My brothers and I sat in my lounging area, none of us speaking, just looking at each other. Then looking to other spots in the room. It was Marcus who broke the silence. My heart aches for Carlisle and his family, he said idly. Keys nodded in solemn agreement. As does mine, brother. It is probably very hard to learn that 3 people you loved as family had been capable of such a heinous act, he said. Bella, I said. I couldn't find the words, but thankfully, Marcus spoke exactly what was on my mind. Bella outshone all of us. Had we been in her shoes, I doubt any of us could have shown that much compassion and forgiveness, he interjected. She mew. Saint be terribly hurt underneath that compassion, Keys added. I turned my palms up. How could anyone not be hurt by that? Holy Virgin Mary, I felt like I wanted to rip my heart out to ease the ache in my chest, I said lowly. My brothers concurred with a slight nod. We turned out heads to the door as we heard approaching footsteps, a familiar sigh. Then came a soft knock. Come in, I called. The door slowly swung open, and Bella stood in the doorway. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt anything, she stammered softly, then turned to go, her breath catching in her throat as she put her weight on her injured ankle. I watched in surprise as Keys was the one to jump up and swiftly intercept Bella. He swept her up into his arms, and carried her to Marcus and I, setting her down gently in an empty chair before returning to his chair as well. Little Swan, what can we do for you? I asked kindly. She looked to me, then Keys, her eyes finally coming to a stop on Marcus. I am so angry and hurt and confused, she began. Then paused. We sat in silence as she gathered her thoughts. I know I did the right thing in there today. Sulpicia even told me that acting brave was half the battle, but I didn't feel forgiving. I didn't feel compassion towards Esme. I wanted to hit her, I wanted to make her hurt, like she'd hurt me. I know you all love me, or at least like me, but it just feels like my world, which used to make some sense, now makes none at all. The people I thought would protect me from the monsters were the monsters all along, and the monsters have protected me, sheltered me, catered to anything I might need, and welcomed me with open arms. Felix comforts me without saying a word. Sulpicia mothers me without acting like the queen I was told she was. Jane has befriended me, and is a true friend to me, taking interest in my hobbies, not just trying to mold me into a mini Jane. She trailed off and glanced shyly at me. You, Arrow, are like a father to me, though I still love Carlisle as a father. And I still love my own father. I've developed a bond with everyone here, but I am still so confused and hurt by what Edward, Alice, and Esme have done. And I am angry, she stated apologetically. Bella, you cannot expect to experience that amount of betrayal and be perfectly okay with it because you've found those who truly adore you. Athenadora talks about you often. As for Felix, well, it gladdens all of us to see some facial expression other than anger or bitterness on his face, Keys said, chuckling when he got to speaking of Felix. Bella's face softened and a wistful, dreamy look came over her. He truly is very good to me, and I love him very much. It's not the desperate, I need you, don't leave me, way I felt about Edward. It's more of an, I want you. And I know you will stay because you want me too, kind of way, she murmured. Marcus smiled. You feel something deep for him, don't you? He inquired. Bella smiled tenderly. I do. I can feel it, I can't describe it properly. But it's like, loving Edward was like being caught up in a hurricane. The storm is beautiful, but it's deadly, and does a lot of damage in a short time before it dissipates. Loving Felix is like it's well. It feels like home, where all this crazy stuff can happen to me in the outside world, but when I come home, everything is okay, everything it just fits, and it just feels right, she said. I couldn't help the smile spreading across my face. You did not owe Esme any forgiveness, you know, Keys said. Bella looked at him and shrugged her shoulders helplessly. I can't help it. I was angry. I'm still angry at her, at Alice, at Edward, but with Alice and Esme, they had really bad things happen to them in their mortal life. And Esme was right, humans go through bad stuff. And they don't suffer the emotional trauma forever even if they don't heal the wounds before they die. When they die, the hurt goes away. Esme had to live with the horror of losing a baby for the rest of her immortal existence. Alice probably didn't hold much love for humanity either. She was shut up in an institution for something she had no control over. She was locked away by humans who didn't understand what was going on. That couldn't have been easy, and maybe under the proper circumstances, they may have healed in time, but they didn't have that. She replied thoughtfully. My Br. Others and I exchanged looks with one another, looks of respect for this human who had so much insight into the world around her. She watched us carefully, then cleared her throat. I also wanted to speak with you about my changing. I don't see the point in waiting, and I wanted to ask you if I could pick who I want to change me. I looked at her, surprised. Felix hadn't told her yet that he wanted to change her. I guess I mused. Of course, dear little swan, did you have someone in mind? I replied. Felix, she said. I let out an exaggerated sigh of relief. Oh well, that's great news. We won't avenue to tell Felix that while we told him he could change you, you selected someone else. Marcus teased. Marcus teasing someone. Goodness, maybe Bella should have come a long time ago. Bella rewarded his jest with a laugh. And when were you wanting to be turned? Keys asked. As soon as possible tonight maybe. I'm getting a little tired of limping around and being carried around, no offense to anyone. She said shyly. None taken, I responded, and you may be turned whenever you wish. She smiled, and stood. I must excuse myself, I would like to go take the last nap I'll ever have. I am completely drained from this morning. We all smiled at her and gestured for her to go. After the door had shut behind her, we all glanced at each other. Enchanting, interesting little creature, Keys said, and we all chuckled. BPOV. I woke up and yawned, stretching out my arms and legs, then got myself slowly out of bed, and felt a little relieved that I didn't wake up to a vampire sitting in my room. I hopped over to my closet and picked out a pair of black lounge sweats with slightly flared legs, and a very dark red pullover hoodie. I changed my clothes and slowly made my way out of my room, along the corridor to Felix's chamber. I pushed open the door without knocking. Felix, I called softly, and looked around, then looked up to his balcony. His head poked over the railing and he flashed me a big grin. Vaulting himself over the rail and landing softly at my feet in a crouch. He stood, and placed his hand along the side of my face. Yes, mon ange, he murmured tenderly, pulling me into his arms. I spoke with Arrow, Keys, and Marcus, and they agreed that I could be turned whenever I wished. I looked at him expectantly. Please be the one who turns me, mon cœur, I whispered as I reached up and ran my fingers through his hair. He growled gently and closed his eyes, smiling. When he opened his eyes, he looked down lovingly at me, pressed his lips to mine, and fairly murmured into my mouth, of course, love. I would be honored. He pulled back only slightly, leaning his head down so that his forehead rested against mine, and stared into my eyes. When did you want to be changed? He asked quietly. Now, I replied, gasping slightly as I was pulled up into his arms. He walked over to the bed in his room. I had this put in last night, I guess I won't need it after tonight. He smiled. I'm keeping mine, they're useful for lounging around on. I teased, then looked at him. Hey, at least after tonight you'll love me more, your silly disdain for humans won't get in the way. I joked. I do not think it is possible for me to love you any more than I do right now, he replied. He set me down on the bed and sat next to me, his arm around my shoulder. I smooshed as close to him as I could. His free hand came up and tilted my head up, and he kissed me again. Do you trust me, chérie ange? He asked, and I nodded my affirmation. He kissed my jaw tenderly, then pressed his lips to my throat and kissed the skin there, his hand resting on my stomach, his other arm still cradling me. FPOV. I kissed the soft skin of her throat, and I could feel her heartbeat pulsing through her veins. I bared my teeth and went in for the bite, whispering softly to her, forgive me, my darling, my light, my love, this may hurt, but I will never leave your side. I sank my teeth into her skin, and her blood flowed into my mouth. Oh, I moaned inwardly. It was exquisite, it tasted more wonderful than it smelled. I hadn't thought such a thing possible. But I was not here to drink her, That now familiar sickening in my stomach came. I began pushing venom into her veins, and the sick feeling went away. I had taken Bella's hand when I bit, and her grip had tightened slightly, but as the wound on her neck healed up, her grip relaxed. Bella honey, it's going to start to hurt soon, please do not feel bad about crying out if you must. We've all been here before. I won't leave your side, I swear. She looked at me and smiled weakly. Leave me to feed, my heart, have Jane sit with me when you cannot, she said, and her eyelids fluttered shut. BPOV. I wanted to die when the burning started. It started right at where the wound had been that Felix had made when he bit into me. It started there, and raced through me. I could feel the venom running through my veins, and every cell it touched burned in fury. I instinctively tightened my grip on Felix's hand, and instantly I regretted it as a soft moan passed from my mouth. Any movement made the fire intensify. Screaming was not an option. Even breathing felt like it was killing me. BPOV. All I could even bring myself to be aware of was the burning. This is hell. I could feel my heart pounding, growing louder in protest at this unnatural change that was occurring. Da-dum. Da-dum. I couldn't even concentrate on breathing, much less try to make out what may have been going on around me. I hoped to God it had been 3 days already, and when the fire raged on, I realized it wasn't, and even though I knew it would only make my face hurt horrifically worse if I opened my mouth to scream, that is exactly what I did. CPOV Carlisle. A shrill, terrified, agonized cry pierced the silence in the castle, and I watched as my 3 remaining children brought their heads up and exchanged worried looks with each other. It took a few moments to click with us why there should be such a heart-stopping scream in the broad daylight. Bella, Rosalie choked out. Emmett and Jasper stood in the same instant I did. Do you think they will allow us to see her? Jasper asked, his tone slightly tinted with fear. I don't know, I'm not even sure if it's up to Arrow. Rosalie said, if I appeal to Felix to let me see her, he might allow me to. Along with Jasper, Jasper may be able to help Bella. I said. We nodded, and left our room, following the sound of the screams. Get ready down the hall. They grew infinitely louder as we approached what must be the room Bella was in. Arrow and Keys stood outside with their wives, along with Jane, Alec, and Dimitri. Carlisle. What can I do for you, my friend? Arrow asked brightly, but I caught the flash of pain that flickered across his face. I knew he'd seen my pain through my eyes. Might we see Bella? Arrow shook his head in reply. I fear it is not my choice to make, but that of Bella's beloved. He explained. Damn it all to hell. I pushed the door open, and my children followed me in. Jasper shut the door behind me. Felix was standing by the window, looking out, a hand in his hair. He whirled around and growled when he saw us. I lifted a hand. Felix, we might be able to help her. I know it must be killing you to see her like this, I murmured. He looked at me, and me alone, and all the black vanished out of his eyes. I can't help her, Carlisle. I can feel that she needs me to do something, but I can't figure out what, and it's driving me crazy. He said defeatedly. JPOV Jane. I paced outside Felix's room. Infuriated. I wasn't allowed in unless Felix needed to feed, and those horrible Cullens were just allowed to waltz in like they fucking owned the place. I looked to Dimitri, who tried to flash me a smile, but couldn't quite muster up the jovial feeling he needed to pull it off as another one of Bella's screams sounded through the castle. Good God, I was tired of waiting. Fuck this, I said, grabbing Dimitri's hand. If he can let a Cullen in there, he can let us in there. I tossed a look over my shoulder at Alec. You may as well come too, brother. Maybe your gift would be of some help, I hope. I swiftly walked into Felix's chamber and looked at the Cullens. FPOV. I didn't care who helped her anymore. Someone needed to do something. Every scream sent a horrific pain through my body. Mon beau ange, what have I done? There is no way she can bear this much pain and still love me afterwards. I looked over at Jane, Dimitri, and Alec as they walked in. Someone help her. I don't care who it is, I said brokenly. I sat with a thump on the chair. Alec, see if you can numb her. Any you, blonde Cullen. No, no, not you, woman. Yes, you, empath, see if you can calm Bella down. Jane commanded flatly. Carlisle and Rosalie looked shocked to see little Jane barking out orders. Her red eyes gazed at me and she sighed. Good Lord, Felix, you look like shit. Go with Dimitri and feed. And get a shower and change your clothes. You want to be presentable when your love wakes up, she said, a slight tone of sympathy creeping into her voice. Jane was worried too. I felt Dimitri's hand tugging at mine. Come on, bro, Bella will be fine, we've all been through this, and we're all okay, he pleaded, and I allowed him to tug me out the door. BPOV. My throat was beginning to hurt from my screaming. And I knew I'd have to stop, and suddenly I felt a numb sensation. It didn't detract much from the fire, but enough that I could stop screaming. I screamed one last time, and then I just whimpered. And then I felt a calm hit me. It was peaceful, and I loved it. And then, my mind was distracted enough to have it click. Jasper and Alec were working on me, trying to keep me comfortable. Not that this current sensation wasn't painful, it really hurt like hell, but it was just enough to take the edge off, I thought. APOV Alec. Jasper and I concentrated all of our focus on Bella. I couldn't speak for the empath. But using my power wasn't as easy as some would make it out to seem. But when I looked at him, he looked as though he was concentrating just as hard as me. He glanced at me and shrugged. Guess it's not easy for you either, was all I dared to say. I was fearful of breaking my focus for even a moment. Jane would have my hide. Carlisle flitted nervously about Felix's bed. The bed where Bella was becoming one of us. Rose, go get a towel, put it in the coldest water you can find, wring it out and cover Bella with it. Emmett, stop pacing and sit down. Carlisle snapped impatiently. BPOV. My heart, oh my hell, my heart is going to make itself explode. It had started beating stronger, almost as if in defiant protest to the poison in my veins. But it was growing. Erratic though the beat became stronger, it was losing the battle. Womp. Womp da dum womp. CPOV Carlisle. A furious heartbeat sounded through the room, a thud flying in the face of the V. Enum in Bella and telling it to go screw itself. But the steady rhythm which had been there faltered and skipped. Her heart may have pounded stronger, but the time between beats was growing farther apart. I walked to the door and threw it open. Look at Arrow. Go get Felix, I said. Arrow looked at me, then turned and ran towards the feeding room. I went back to Bella and sat at the edge of the bed, and Sulpicia sat on the other side. We each took one of Bella's hands, and watched her. Da-dum 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 womp womp womp. Womp. The door flew off its hinges as Felix burst in, his eyes focused on Bella. He came over and I went to get up to give him my spot, but Sulpicia got up first. She smiled at me. I think you being one of the first people she sees, behind Felix, may do her, and you, some good, Carlisle. She spoke kindly. How could I have been fooled by Edward that the Volturi had become cold and cruel as the years had passed? Especially Sulpicia, she was one of the kindest. Whoa. Men I knew. Felix sat down and took Bella's hand, watching her expectantly. Womp 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 da dum foohump. Bella's heart faltered, and with one final womp, fell still. BPOV. I felt the fire withdrawing from my toes, traveling backwards up my body, and I was aware of a chill coming over me, then fading away. The pain had evaporated from almost every part of my body, but my heart still ached horribly with each beat. It picked up slightly, and then with a final thud that I felt vibrate through my body like a shockwave, it stilled. The flames licked at my heart for a few seconds before abating. I took a deep breath in, and found to my shock that I could taste the air. I could smell everything. Okay Bella, keep yourself calm, I thought to myself. I slowly opened my eyes and was awestruck by the silver beams of moonlight coming in through the window. FPOV. Her eyes slowly opened to reveal midnight-colored irises. Of course she'd wake up thirsty. She hasn't had any type of food, human food, or vampire food in a little over 3 days. She looked at me, and suddenly I just wanted to be alone with her. I wanted to be the one to keep watch over her. Get out, everyone, I said sternly. I know you all want to observe her. But she's a newborn and we do not want to startle her, or make her feel any strong emotions right now. Well, Felix, you'd evoke a strong emotion in her too, as her mate, Carlisle said matter-of-factly. Then the empath, Jasper, stuck up for me. No, Carlisle, they have a deep, quiet love. Bella will be able to rein herself in to listen to Felix. We should go. Especia. LLY in light of what happened not too long before she was turned. Carlisle blanched, something I didn't really think possible for a vampire to do, then nodded. You're right, Jasper, he said, then gestured for his children to follow him out of the room. Sulpicia walked to the door. Alec, Jane, come on. Felix, I will tell the others to leave you be for now. They, too, exited the room and Sulpicia pulled it shut behind her. I turned to Bella, and smiled softly at her. I held out a hand, which she took, and I slowly helped her up to a sitting position. Bella, mon ange? I asked tentatively. She gave me half a smile, and seemed to be sorting through a ton of possible reactions. She settled on one. Felix, she whispered. I slowly reached a hand out and trailed a finger down her cheek. She closed her eyes and exhaled shakily. How do you feel, my dear? I asked. I'd never been more nervous, excited, and scared. I feel overwhelmed, but as long as I just keep my focus on everything, I'm okay, I think, she said. Then put a hand on my arm. My love, I know I have to drink human blood, but I don't want to kill anyone. I can't kill anyone right now. Her black eyes bored holes into my soul as she pleaded with me. I nodded gently. Bella dear, I am going to stand up, and go to the door, okay? I'm going to have Jane warm you some blood from our blood bank. It was freely given, and the humans who gave it are still alive. All right, does that sound okay for now? She half smiled, and I took that as a yes. I stood and walked to the door, and pulled it open to see Jane standing there. I figured you wouldn't go far. Listen, go get Bella some blood from the blood bank. Warm it up for her. We'll do this until we find an alternative. She doesn't want to kill anyone right now, and I think if she had to, it would send her over the edge. Jane gave me a thumbs up and took off running. This is proof I love you all. Down the hall. I went back to Bella, who was still sitting on the bed. She took my hand in hers. How do I look, mon cœur? She asked me. I licked my lips. She looked divine. Nothing had changed at all about her, except her skin had gotten paler, her eyes were black, and her hair was softer, shinier. More lustrous looking. I think I may have lied, my dear, I said under my breath. A look of confusion shot across her face, and I hurried to explain. I said I could ever love you more. I lied. I love you more now, because now I am guaranteed my forever with you. Relief washed over her features, and she rewarded me with a dazzling grin. Her black eyes sparkled with delight. It's going to be hard waiting until our wedding night, and I want to do this right. Carlisle paused. Rose, Jasper, Emmett and I were sitting in the solarium. I was reading, Jasper was sketching the scenery outside. Rose and Emmett were engrossed in a game of chess. I heard light, unfamiliar footsteps coming down the hall and lifted my head as the great wooden double doors were pushed open, and Bella and Felix strode in. Determination written all over Bella's face. I stood up and slowly walked over to greet her. She pulled herself short a step and hesitated. I found myself mirroring her hesitation. My muscles tensed in anxiousness. A soft smile spread across Bella's face and I relaxed. Sorry, Carlisle, I did not meant to cause you doubt. She said gently. I smiled at both her and Felix, and gestured for them to have a seat on the couch nearby. My 3 living children flanked me on either side, and Bella and Felix took the love seat across from us. To what do I owe the honor of your presence, my dear? I said warmly. I wanted to see how you and my siblings were doing, Carlisle. I felt my children relax at her reply. Though she had been kind to us in the throne room as a human, we did not know how she'd take everything once she'd been turned, and we felt more at ease at hearing the warm familiarity in Bella's tone. I cast a nervous glance at Felix, sure that he'd be less forgiving of the hurt that Edward, Alice, and Esme had dealt to his mate, but he too wore a gentle expression, only breaking his gazing at Bella to glance at us every so often. I mean no harm either, Carlisle. Bella is my mate, and if she can forgive, then so can I. It would hurt her if I harmed any of you, and that would be too much for me to bear, he said. Bella leaned across and placed a hand over my own. How are you all doing, ma purr? She asked, concern furrowing her brow. I looked at her, thinking, how were we doing? I wasn't too sure, but then Jasper spoke. We are doing okay, sister. Once we found out the depth of the betrayals of the others, our main concern became for you, he stated. Rosalie and Emmett nodded their agreement. I was concerned for you, for I knew in my heart, once I saw your reactions, that you all were innocent. The first was hurting for you all. I knew if I must be hurting as bad as I was, and I have been a part of your family for far shorter a time than you all had been a family. I couldn't even fathom how deeply that must have cut you, especially you two, Jasper and Carlisle, Bella responded. Felix shifted slightly and took Bella's hand in his, giving it a gentle squeeze. I watched them with interest. Just their presence in the room seemed to lift the spirits of my children, and I could feel it lifting my own. No, Felix would never harm Bella. At first, I was angry. I was sure you all were complicit, even more so through your ignorance, Felix spoke slowly, carefully. Bella had a good influence on him, I could see that. He was calmer, gentler than I had ever seen him. It made me so happy to see that he seemed so fulfilled. He spoke further. But when I saw that Bella was more concerned for you than for herself, I tried to place myself in her shoes. And especially when I saw Arrow's face more pain-stricken than I had ever seen before, I knew that there was more than what met the eye, and you know me, Carlisle, until that day I'd always been a kill first, ask questions later type of person. He chuckled. I found myself laughing too, as Bella smiled at him. I like it here. I'd forgotten how beautiful Volterra was, I said. Bella looked to Felix, a questioning look in her eyes. Felix shook his head. Not our choice, mon ange, he said. Arrow is the one who can extend that offer. We do not wish to join the guard, I stated. Bella nodded. I know, Carlisle. She smiled reassuringly at me, and gestured to Felix as she stood. Come, mon cœur, we have much to discuss. He stood, took her hand, and smiled at us. Carlisle, I would like to come speak with you later, he said. I nodded. That would be wonderful, I replied. I had an idea of what he wanted to talk to me about. They left, and shut the doors behind them. Jasper looked at me. That was refreshing. He grinned. Rosalie smiled, and Emmett's laughter boomed off the walls for the first time since our arrival. Rosalie looked slightly perplexed. I raised an eyebrow at her. Maybe I want to join the guard. I want to stay here. Bella makes me happy. This place makes me happy, she said softly. Emmett looked at his wife. Rose, you know that's not a choice we can make. Arrow, Marcus, and Keys are the decision makers. We can ask, but maybe it'd be better if we leave it to them to offer. I do not think they might be as forgiving as Bella and Felix are, he said wisely, and I looked upon my normally goofy son with a new respect. Kid could be pretty damn insightful when he wanted to. Rosalie nodded. I know. But let's not be in any hurry to leave, okay? She pleaded gently, and I looked at Jasper, who nodded. I agree. We all seem to be, for the most part, content here. No need to leave now, and we have permission to stay until Bella's debut. We owe it to Bella to stay for that. We can figure the rest out as it comes, he stated sagely. We all nodded to ourselves. Keys paused. I stood beside my wife, Athenadora, as we gazed out our window at the setting Tuscan sun. How is our newborn faring? I asked her. She and Sulpicia had been fawning over Bella all day, until Felix had come and insisted on taking his mate for a stroll. She's doing quite well, my love. She seems to handle everything fine as long as she deals with everything in a linear fashion, one thing at a time. I think it should get her through the newborn stage quite nicely. My mate responded. Is she taking human blood? I inquired. Yes, but from the vault. Jane warms it up for her, and she drinks it. Arrow thinks it wise not to try and force her to take it from a living human, given the unpredictability of her being a newborn. I pondered silently. I saw no point in forcing her either, and should she decide to try the Cullen diet, we'd probably allow that as well. Whatever floats the boat. I couldn't stomach the thought of it. But whatever. No skin off our necks, haha. Jane paused. I tossed the bag of blood into the pot of hot water and set the timer. I didn't want to boil the blood, just wanted to bring it up to body temperature. Dimitri walked into the kitchen and wrapped his arms around me. Whatcha doin'? He crooned into my ear. I laughed softly and wiggled around to face him. Warming up blood for Bella. He smiled and glanced over my shoulder. The things we do for family. He grinned. I nodded. It may not be appetizing to me, but I could see why Felix and Arrow didn't want to force Bella to adhere to our diet. It's not for everyone, and well, we just don't do things like that around here. I was glad that she hadn't insisted on trying the vegetarian way. That was just disgusting. The timer buzzed, and Dimitri let go of me so I could finish my task. I plucked the bag out of the pot and ran to Bella's chambers. I didn't even knock, just threw open the doors and tossed her the blood. Thanks, she said happily, and drained the bag and shot me a sheepish look. Guess I was a little hungrier than I thought, yeah. I laughed, and sat down across from her. Where's Felix? I asked. It was odd to not see him hovering over her. She chuckled. I sent him out to get me some furnishings for my chambers. I love him, but I couldn't stand to see him so worried about me. I understand, but I think we both needed a break. She smiled as I laughed. FPOV. I paced outside the Cullen suite, wondering what to say. For the first time in centuries, I felt nervous. Felix, stop pacing and just come in already. I heard Carlyle's voice call out. I pushed open the door and stepped in. Jasper was gazing out the window, Rosalie and Emmett seemed engrossed in their video game, and Carlyle was sitting by the fireplace reading a large medical book. He glanced up at me and smiled benevolently and gestured to the chair across from him. I walked over and sat down, and promptly began fidgeting with my hands. Well, what has you so nervous, Felix? Carlyle chuckled. I was eased by the peace that had seemed to settle over Carlyle's coven. Well, so I love Bella, and I can't quite show up on her human father's doorstep and ask for his blessing. I mean, what I wanted to say is, I love Bella and vow to take good care of her for all eternity. Oh cripes, this isn't going how I wanted it to, I stammered, searching for the words I had so carefully rehearsed. I ran my hand through my hair nervously and paused for a moment while Carlyle watched me, a bemused expression on his face. BPOV. I was sitting in Sulpicia's chamber as she brushed my hair. I closed my eyes and smiled in contentment. I replayed my conversation a few days before with Carlyle in my head, and realized something was bothering me. I tensed slightly. What's the matter, Tesseri? Sulpicia asked, noting the change in my posture. Well, I was thinking about the talk I had with Carlyle and my siblings the other day. Rosalie seemed like she wanted to stay here, and so did the others, to be honest. I know it's not my place to ask Arrow and the others, but I just want everyone to be happy, I replied. Sulpicia paused, then sat the brush down on the vanity and spun my chair around to face her. But what would make you happy, my child? She asked. I pondered this for a moment. If the Cullens stayed here, I would be okay with that. I would miss them sorely if they left. After all, I felt justice had been dealt out quite fairly, and what I wanted above all else was for everyone to have the same peace I felt. I would miss them if they were not here, I said. Sulpicia smiled and kissed my forehead. Then you have every right to ask what you want to ask, she stated simply. I smiled at her and nodded. Well, then I believe when we are done, I need to go speak to Arrow and my uncles, I said. CPOV. I watched Felix as he toyed nervously with his hair. I closed my book, placed it on the end table beside me, and leaned forward. Felix, I said as I placed my hand over his, please simply ask. He nodded and blurted out, I want to ask Bella to marry me and I wanted your blessing. He sighed in relief as he sat back. Felix, I have had the joy of watching Bella with you, and seeing how happy you make her. If she accepts your proposal, you have my utmost blessing and my good wishes for you and her both, I said. Rosalie glanced over and nodded to Felix, as did Emmett and Jasper. When do you plan to ask her? Rosalie asked. Felix looked over at her. At her debut next week, he replied. Rose smiled. That seems like a good time, she said. Arrow paw. I was walking in the garden when I sensed a familiar presence and smiled. I turned slowly as not to startle her. She was doing wonderfully as a newborn, and I didn't want to ruin her track record. Ah, my young Bella, how are you today, Angel? I said as I smiled at her. A flicker of emotions flew through her eyes, as they did whenever he was working through something in her head. I held out my arm to her, and she silently strode over and linked her arm through mine. I am well, I believe, Father, at least, as long as I pick one thing at a time to deal with, she said softly, her voice resonating in the air. She wore a simple summer dress in a pale shade of pink, her hair gathered back into a soft French braid. Tendrils of her hair framed her face and her lips curved in a benevolent smile. Yes, I mused to myself, she is a good match for Felix. I still cannot read her though. I made a mental note to invite Eleazar and the rest of the Denali coven to her debut. You seem as though something is on your mind, Bella, I observed. She nodded and gestured to a stone bench near our fish pond. We sat down together and she leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat there for a moment until she finally spoke. I am concerned with the Cullens, father. I stiffened noticeably and Bella hurried to finish her thought. They've done nothing wrong. Please don't think they have. I am worried for when they leave. I will miss them badly, and I keep getting the feeling they don't want to leave. Her voice trailed off as she thought again to herself. I had been slightly dreading this conversation, as I had already guessed slightly what she was going to ask, having read the conversation from Felix that they'd had with the Cullens. I had discussed it with my brothers. And we'd all agreed that we'd wait and see what Bella wanted. Her happiness was paramount to us, and if she was uncomfortable with the Olympic coven, we'd handle it. I know it's not my place to ask. But I wanted to know if they could stay. My heart breaks so horribly for them, father, and they at least seem to be at peace here. And I would like to get to know my siblings and father all over again. Our first chance was misguided by Alice, Esme, and Edward, she said. She turned her face up to look at me and there was honest pleading in her eyes. I patted her arm reassuringly. I will discuss this with your uncles and aunts, my dear child. I do not see it being a problem, so long as they understand you have genuinely forgiven the Cullens. What does your mate say to this? I asked her. She smiled at the mention of Felix. I told her it was not our place to ask, but I see she's done so anyways. Felix said, smiling as he walked over to where Bella and I sat. She glanced at him apologetically. And he shook his head and bent down to place a kiss on her forehead. Fear not, mon ange, I am not displeased. You could never make me upset. Your happiness means more to me than my own life. And I knew you'd come to Arrow anyways. He chuckled lovingly, then turned to me. If I were not so in love with her I would suggest removing her heart to see if it is indeed made of gold. He jested. I looked at Bella and laughed in agreement. Don't worry, my child, I foresee no problems with it. But as I said, your aunts and uncles will want to know you've truly forgiven the Cullens. She nodded. There is nothing to forgive. I do not even look forward to the cutting of Rosalie's hair. She tried in her own way to drive me away. Had she come out and just told me, I would have been too blind to her warning. My daughter said. She furrowed her brow. I also need to wrap things up with my human father, Charlie. I miss him so much. She said, sighing softly. Felix offered a hand to her, and as she took it, he pulled her to stand with him, wrapped her in his arms, and kissed her hair. We will figure out a way for you to still have your father, my love. He murmured. Bella looked to me and I nodded in agreement. We will resolve this for you in a way that will bring happiness to all. I agreed. And please, my dear, call Victoria and invite her for your debut. I am sure she misses you as well. I said. Bella nodded, and Felix mouthed thank you to me. I smiled in acknowledgement and he turned and led her away. Come, mon cœur, let's go get you something to drink. He chuckled as they walked together out of the garden. What a perfect match. The gods themselves could not do better. I mused to myself. FPOV. We were feeding in the room we had set aside especially for that purpose. Bella was down in the kitchen warming up her bag of blood. She didn't want to kill any human. And to keep her happy I had promised to kill only those in need of mercy, the already dying, the ones who were ill. Those to whom death would truly be a reprieve from a hell of an existence or those needing to be judged for their crimes, the scum of the earth. Arrow assisted me in is by reading the thoughts of the humans who passed through our doors. I raised my head from my meal when I caught a whiff of a human but it smelled off, sour even. I looked to Arrow and raised an eyebrow. He nodded and sought the source. Finally gently leading a small child to me. She is dying, my young one. She is terminal, and has not long in this world. Had I known, I would have spared her parents. That she could live out the rest of her existence here in comfort with them. Arrow's eyes darkened and I knew his pain. Whenever a child happened into the group reserved for our feeding, Arrow would separate them and their family from the rest of the group. The family would then find themselves in our gift shop. Sometimes a child and their family got into the feeding room, at which point they were separated from the group. Chelsea would sever all bonds except the bonds they had to each other, and form new ones with us. We had to keep our existence secret, but we refused to kill a child or their parents. We weren't monsters. After all, I knew the burden of this small orphan soul weighed heavily on my leader. The little girl looked at me, and I was struck by how much the child's brown eyes reminded me of Bella's eyes when she had been human. She walked to me, and I could smell the fear and the wonder. Are you an angel? Am I going to go to heaven? Her innocent little voice rang out as she slid her hand into mine. Oh little child, you are most certainly going to heaven, but please forgive me, I am no angel. I choked out, my voice breaking with emotion. She smiled, and squeezed my hand. I am so tired. And I hurt so bad. Mommy and Daddy are over there. Here she pointed to two bodies laying at the feet of Keys, who looked shockingly ashamed, and I am so tired of being in pain. Pastor Evans says in heaven we can't get sick or hurt, and I want to see my mommy and daddy again. Keys turned away from the bodies and I could have sworn I saw his shoulders heave with one solitary sob. Alec, I called, never taking my eyes off the little girl, one hand reassuringly stroking her hair. Alec came over, joined by Athenadora, Sulpicia, and Jane. He looked at me and nodded, and at that moment I had never been more grateful for the close bond we shared. He understood what I was asking of him. Oh sweet little bambina, precious Tesseri, Sulpicia crooned, her arms fluttering around the child, idly playing with the girl's short red hair. Arrow, you are sure there is no hope for her? I asked. We couldn't treat her with our doctors. Arrow shook his head sadly. No, Felix, he whispered. And you are the one she seems to trust. I hung my head, then knelt in front of her, taking her other hand in mine. I was, up until a certain brown-haired human turned my world upside down, the least merciful of the Volturi. Even less so than Keys. Little girl, are you sure this is what you want? We could send you home if you promised not to speak of what happened, we could erase your me. Maury, so you wouldn't have to lie. She stopped me by clapping a hand over my mouth. No, I hurt. I know I am going to heaven. I knew when I was in the hospital when the angels came in my dream and said I was going to heaven soon. I'm ready. Pastor Evans says it's a nice place, and I can run and play my toys and do lots of stuff I can't do here, 'cause I'm sick. She said. I sighed out of habit and with a nod to Alec, who cut off all her senses, I drained her. I was brought out of my broken stupor by a horrified cry. I looked up to see my mate's red eyes looking at me, going black with fury before she growled. Every rumble dripping with disgust and hatred, turned on her heel and stomped from the room. I had no time to recover from the shock and horror before the doors flew open, slamming against the wall, sending a shower of granite and marble dust to the floor, and, copper eyes flashing with angry black flecks, stood Rosalie Hale. What the hell have you done, Felix? A child, she hissed furiously. Do you know what Bella is doing right now? She is ripping up every plant in the garden, and smashing the benches and statues. She is pissed. How dare you? A child. I thought you Volturi were different than that. But I suppose I was wrong. She growled. At this, I growled in reply, and in a flash I had her by her throat against the wall. You presume too much, Miss Hale. The child was terminally ill. She asked me to end her life so she could go to heaven to be with her parents, who were killed due to a horrible oversight on our part. With that, I dropped and went off to find Bella in the gardens. I saw her about to destroy her favorite fountain, and I grabbed her hand. She hissed at me. Bella, mon cœur, stop. She looked at me, her eyes a frighteningly feral black. You killed a child. A child, Felix. This is unforgivable. Save your endearments for another, we are through. I do not associate with child killers. She growled, attempting to wrench out of my grip. I was sudden L.Y. hit with a wave of calm, and I took a deep breath to speak, when Bella shrieked. You knock it off, right now, Jasper Whitlock. You knock it off right the hell now. Jasper jumped down from a balcony above and shook his head. Bella, you must listen to what truly happened. The child was terminally ill. She was dying, Bella, and due to a mistake, a rare, tragic mistake, her parents were killed. She asked to be allowed to go to heaven. Bella, I was there, I saw it with my own eyes. He explained, keeping the calm aimed at Bella, though I was getting hit too. I don't fucking care, she said coldly, jabbing her finger into Jasper's chest with each word. She turned to me and roared. She was still a child. She wrenched her other arm from my grip and stormed over to Jane and Rosalie. Jane shish. Ot me a sympathetic look and mouthed, I will try to explain. I nodded weakly in gratitude and collapsed onto a bench, clutching my aching chest. Jasper sat beside me, silent. He didn't try to alter my emotions. He just sat there. Felix. He finally spoke. Bella will see reason. Give her some time, he said. I looked at him. And just how the hell do you know? I asked, a little harsher than I intended. But he didn't seem bothered by it. If there's one thing I do well, it's observe. I had plenty of opportunity to observe Bella as a human. You must remember, Felix, Bella is still a newborn. She's doing well for a newborn. But even she herself has said she is still volatile. Most newborns deal in black and white, not shades of gray. As a human, Bella saw all the finer nuances and was therefore quick to forgive. As a newborn, Bella sees black and white. I wonder sometimes if she would have been so easy to forgive as had she been a newborn. He said, "Of course I would have, Jasper." We both turned to see Bella standing over by the garden gate. Facts are facts. You, Carlisle, Rosalie, and Emmett had no part in the games of the other three, and were in fact, victims yourselves. Here she turned to glare at me. Just like it is a fact, she snarled, that you drained a child. I groaned and slumped my shoulders in defeat. In one act of mercy, I had cost myself the only woman I ever truly loved. Bella, stop. I get it. I'm horrible and you hate me, and you know what? I can't find it in me to care because that little girl looked me in the eye, told me she knew she was dying, and asked me to reunite her with her parents. I cannot regret this, because she had nothing left for this world. She was tired, hurting, in pain, and she wanted to go. She went painlessly, I made sure of that. Alec numbed her and cut off all her senses. If that's not a good enough explanation for you, then I am not going to justify myself any further. I stood up, looked my mate in the eyes, and smiled a slight, sad smile. I will never stop loving you, Bella Swan, but if this is not good enough for you then I am sorry. I turned and exited the garden, but not before seeing her mouth slightly open in shock. BPOV. I sat heavily down on my bed, whimpering at the pain in my chest. Jane followed me in, concern written all over her face. My hand traveled up to my chest and clutched at it, as if I could will away the pain. I have drained the equivalent of 10 men in bagged blood and I still feel this pain. Why am I not sated, Jane? Why does my heart still feel as though it will break itself apart? I asked. Jane shrugged. I don't know, Bella, but the brothers would know. They know all the vampire anatomy stuff. Shall I fetch them? She replied, shrugging her shoulders. I shook my head as a calm, deep voice came from my doorway. There is no need to fetch us, Jane. Marcus said as he stepped into my room with Keys and Arrow following behind. The pain peaked again and I whimpered again. Marcus came over to me, sitting beside me on the bed and draping a comforting arm around my shoulder. Bella, we must talk about what is happening to you, Keys said. MPOV. Bella looked at my brother, her hand tightening on her chest. Every so often she would whimper. Keys and Arrow looked at me and nodded. It is time, Marcus, to tell Bella of the bond she shares with Felix. Arrow said, resignation in his voice. Keys nodded his assent. As we speak, Felix is curled in a ball in my antechamber, growling in pain. He said. I looked to Bella, who now wore a very confused expression. Perhaps we should have Major Whitlock in here. He has more experience with newborns than we do. I said. Jane nodded and ran off, returning about 5 minutes later with Jasper Whitlock, who took one look at Bella and blanched before addressing me. Exactly what kind of bond is at work here, Marcus? He inquired incredulously. I sighed, and began my tale. As we all know, there is a bond we share with our mates. For most of us, it is just a gentle pull, a tug, if you will, when we are apart. We are gifted with intuition as to if our mates need us or are in danger. In the case of Bella and Felix, their bond is so strong and deep that for Bella to break it off in the manner she did, has dealt a horrific fracture to the bond. It is still impervious to manipulation from someone other than Bella or Felix, and is still as strong as it ever was. But that fracture is causing pain to both Bella and Felix. Here I turned to her and took her hand in mine. Young Swan, we are already seeing the consequence of you attempting to break the bond. You have fed more but still look as though you are wasting away. Felix has not fed at all, as he knows that the pain is not a thirst pain. He too is weakening. Bella, you are both withering away, and at the pace this is going, you both will stop existing within the week. She snorted derisively. I don't care if I stop existing. Felix was my everything, and after I saw 3 days ago, here she began whimpering again. At this, Jasper spoke. Bella, I have seen you as human and vampire. You are a newborn and very volatile, seeing only black and white, not the extenuating circumstances. In your newborn mind, you saw Felix drain a child. End of story. However, had you a few more years under your belt, you would have taken into consideration the facts. The child was dying. Her parents were dead. A gross mistake on the parts of the brothers, but mistakes happen. She mistook Felix for an angel, asked him to let her join her parents. She stated that she was in pain, and she was tired. She did not die a painful death. Alec completely numbed her, and only then did Felix take her life. I looked to the girl we'd all come to love in such a short time. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Her delicate features contorted in pain. "Jasper," she gasped. "It hurts so bad. Make it stop." Jasper knelt before her and tilted her head down to meet his gaze as her eyes opened. "I cannot make the pain stop. Bella, you heard Marcus. Your bond with Felix will tolerate no external manipulation. You must do this yourself. Bella, find it in your heart to forgive him, and return to your rightful place by his side. Bella," he continued ominously, "you must see the grays or Felix will die. You may not care about yourself, you never have, but you do care about Felix. The very fact you are in pain is evidence of this." Bella sighed and closed her eyes, one solitary venom tear slipping down her cheek. We all glanced at each other. We could cry, but only under the most excruciating pain. Not even loss of a limb rendered the venom tears. The amount of pain Bella must have been in made us all flinch. "Tell him to come to me, I wish to speak with him." Keys shook his head. "Not possible. My dearest child Felix is completely unable to move." Another tear slipped down her cheek. FPOV. It was all-consuming, the pain. I laid there for what seemed years, though each day KU's would tell me how many days had passed, what Bella was doing, which wasn't much of anything. Apparently, though she was not immobilized, she mistook her pain for thirst and nearly depleted the reserves of blood we had on hand. But when Keys informed me that Bella had actually cried, had genuine tears of venom on her cheek, I felt as though I would be ripped apart from the agony that shot through me. My angel. In pain, actually crying. From the sheer amount of it, I would die a million deaths by fire before causing her that kind of agony. VPOV. Yes, Arrow, I understand. I'll be back as quick as possible. I whispered into my phone. I broke off the trail of some hikers in the Swiss Alps, and turned south, running as fast as I could, back to Volterra, to my little sister who needed me. APOV. I hung up with Victoria and sighed. Sulpicia rubbed my shoulders and I patted her hand gently in gratitude. "Isabel is not so well, is she?" she asked. I shook my head. Truth was, Bella had stopped moving. She was frozen in place. Curled in a ball, similar to the position Felix was in, her face turned towards her window. Her eyes were vacant and void, though we could all still feel her presence. I sighed. "No, my dear. And with the Denali clan arriving tomorrow, and Bella's debut in 4 days, if she survives, we need to fix this. The Denalis are close to the Cullen family. I do not know how they will react upon hearing that Edward, Alice, and Esme are no longer living. I cannot risk having Bella and Felix in such a weakened state that they will not be able to fend for themselves should the Denalis try anything. I have recalled Victoria back to our walls in hopes that she will be able to help." Sulpicia sighed and leaned her head down to my shoulder. "I am sure that things will be okay. Something has to give, yes." I nodded and kissed her hair. "I sure hope so, my love, with all my heart I hope so." BPOV. Sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, rain, sun, clouds, wind. I saw it all from my window. From the place where I had frozen. My stupid pride, magnified by my newborn volatility, had prevented me from going to Felix that day, and the next day I found I could not move. Every so often, my fingers would splay out and then clutch the fabric of my comforter beneath it. I refused to speak, though every day I had visitors. Keys would come and inform me of how Felix was faring, and assure me that he would tell Felix how I was. How was I? I couldn't figure it out, but my inner dialogue was interrupted by a smiling face framed with flaming red hair obscuring my view of the Tuscan countryside. "Bella, look at what's happened to you." I heard others walk in and Victoria turned to them angrily. "Why has no one thought to simply move Bella to lay beside Felix? Maybe a closer proximity to each other will help enough so that their voices can do the rest." It was then I felt my body being lifted, though a part of me remained on the bed. I watched as Victoria carried me out of the room and I followed her along the corridor, the rest of the Volturi watching my body with concerned, despairing faces. I watched as she walked into Key's antechamber and laid my body down beside Felix. I rejoined my body and looked into the pitch-black eyes of Felix as he stared at me. I saw his eyes shift in concentration, like he was trying something. Maybe if I could just move my fingers to him. The pain roared fresh in me and I whimpered, the first sound I had made in nearly 3 days. His eyes flashed with concern. I tried to signal something to him, anything, but got no recognition from him. My inner voice cried out in despair and frustrated rage. Mon cœur, I am so sorry. I forgive you, I know you had no choice, I know you did what was best for her, please understand that I was just shocked. My newborn rage took over from there. I'm so sorry. FPOV. I felt a snap within me as I watched one single tear slip down Bella's cheek. I had to comfort her. I growled in irritation as my fingers resisted my will. Until finally my fingers inched closer to hers. Bella, mon ange, you have to meet me halfway. I am too weak. Please show me some sign you forgive me. I am so sorry. BPOV. Snap. Something fell back into place. And I whimpered at his growl. Was he mad at me? I looked into his eyes, and saw no hatred there, just love and pleading. Why was he pleading? I whimpered again as his hand moved towards me, then stopped. No. Please just touch me. I can come back if I can just feel you. I sent all my willpower to my hand. MPOV. We watched the unfolding scene with incredulity on our faces. I looked to my family and then back to Felix and Bella. We must leave. We are not meant to see this. I have a feeling Bella and Felix will join us later in the throne room. Keyes said, shocking us with his insight. He looked at us innocently and shrugged. What? I have feelings too, you know. He grinned impishly as we all filed out of his antechamber. FPOV. I knew, when I saw her hand tremble and move, ever so slightly, that she still loved me. I gazed at her, never taking my eyes off of her. Well, I couldn't move, so I didn't really have a choice in the matter. I let my love for her shine through, hoping she could read it in my eyes. I never stopped loving you. Please, Ange, I know you can do this. I cannot move any further. BPOV. I whimpered again as I looked in his eyes. Love. There was love there. He didn't hate me. I felt a slight pop in my chest as I moved my hand closer to his, and finally, after what seemed forever, my index finger brushed his hand. Suddenly I felt a rush through me. The pain receded from my chest and I gasped. I tried moving my legs, no luck. But maybe I could talk. I decided I could test it out. Felix. Mon cœur. I choked out, my voice hoarse with emotion. FPOV. Her voice was like music to my soul. If she could talk, maybe I could too. Bella, I rasped out. Her eyes lit up and I felt the joy and relief passing between us. The pain, and I had come to be used to in our short, yet oh so long time apart, faded, and I felt my soul set itself right. I tried to move, to no avail, but I could talk. Bella could talk, and she was here. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. We are very close to a milestone of 1000 subscribers. And do let me know your reviews in comment section.